That I get the teacher. Then I do some treasure ya was sushi or the gallet to street. Good so the Dagon ala Tioniji lesson, Tioniji and Limpu.
So yesterday, Rinpoche received 2 questions, and Rinpoche wants to answer them now.
虽然我是五蕴谁对吧？但是自己的蕴我们会有感觉，比如饿了、渴了，但是别人的孕我们没有感觉，别人饿了我们没有感觉，所以我们对自己的感受会有贪，对别人的感受我们无动于衷。这个怎么去掉呢？等于落叶的苦愿里面，在这面的短大的，쿠란기 저어디 표신 디레샤 디지 림피고에 차기도 상고도 다 수수 두고 또 디간라 카공 디간라 초리그레스 두고 또비 초리그레스 카공비 초리그레스 이나양 미신다지 두고 또바다 카공비 거라 수수로 초리그 말이스 세장 나랑초 수수기 초라 차당 연구를 되자 연구를 가인스는 수수기 초어디 수수 초으로 왔어. 디워지는 디워디 수수 초그래 동해지는 동해디 수수 초그래. 세상 수수기 초어디도 되자당. 시당디 리그레스 신다라 리그 말레스. 신다라 동해유는 수수 동해인보 초기 메디간라 생기 디워드 동해라 디게 리그 말레스. 차당 리그 말레스. 디송구도 디 세서 디인디간라 다 티어디 가르쳐야 다 수수기 초라 차당 레야디 간데스 가고 레세 페시 딘다부지 러도 저 딘다부지 레샤 녀라 저디 세부 차이는 디 쿠란기 저디 갈래야 자제 자세부 차마송 이나야 페시 쿠란기 러단 치에 있나 나공아 출 간데스 라버스나 뇌차 지에디 뇌차 지에디 가르당 저 요르스 러딩알라 디슬라버로 ngala pintu du sechi yamena nge yabu tungu du sechi dindeji to ne ndesha ji yonggo res nge tungu du sechi kangder nge tungu du nge hagu yue sechi nga se lu da zao ni ka che yo ma res di ka che su nan ndesha ji sa ra ma res di la baro 그래서 di la 아니 저원 di le yue sa re 저원 di le yue sa di 아니 두고 또 소나 또비 초디 레기리 가서 또비 초디 레기리 디세위 된다 가서 칼라사그로 세상 칼라라 자신 레기로 가서 칼라라 자신 레베 카도라 자신이 루디 간데스 지그레스 가서 딜러 워다 수수로 초디 디도 레디 간라 초디도 딜러 미니 차당 레기 말했어 가서 러고 말해 초 디월은 되자당 동해라 시당 링 말씀 가서 러고 말 가서 단다 가르 세부 수고 월스나 차당디 간테스 리기 월레스 간테스 되자 지기래 간테스 시당 지기 월레스 디세부 수고 월다
So someone asked Rinpoche a question, basically saying, well, when we're hungry or thirsty, well, a certain feeling arises in our mind. So we feel hungry, we feel thirsty, there are hunger and thirst, but that doesn't happen to the other person. It doesn't happen to other people. Our hunger, only we can experience our hunger, nor the other person. So it's therefore a very personal feeling, which then gives rise to attachment, pleasant feeling, unpleasant feelings, giving rise to attachment and aversion, respectively. So other people cannot experience our own personal feelings, and we cannot know the feelings of others. That's basically the question. So Rinpoche is not exactly clear what the person means with their question, what they're actually asking. But he supposes, well, Rinpoche guesses that it has to do with his explanation yesterday about how to let go of our attachment. So then Rinpoche started to answer the question, saying, well, usually whatever we do it for the self, we do it for I. Why? Because I consider it to be good. I consider it to be bad, and so forth. So it always goes back to the I. It always goes back to self. So it's I. We're never separated from this sense of I. It's always involved in every decision we make, in every thought we have, and thus we experience attachment. When we're hungry, well, a feeling of hunger arises. And so that kind of feeling of hunger, and then thereafter quenching this hunger or this thirst, the thirst that arises, well, that leads to attachment to food and so forth. But the question is, who's that person who experiences pleasure, displeasure? Who's that person who's attached? Who's this person who has desire, and so on? We don't say we don't have those. We don't say there's no feeling, that we don't say that there's no attachment, that there's no aversion, and so forth. But the question is how. We need to know how these arise, attachment, anger, and so forth. Where do they come from, and where do pleasure, etc., where do they come from? What is the root of all these?
다 배치를 디송교에서래. 수수의 초 디워집에 가도디라. 초 디워는 되자 내용도. 초 랑주기 초 디워는 미빈 되자 지에 디 다 나세기 나오냐면 루던 저와 가리오레스. 나스 다 나라 디부 용구도스 나세기 공 상루티 다 만지와 이나야 랑주의 초 디워지디간라 초 디워 미빈 되샤지 지용구도 디간데스 까고레스 페이지 고랑기 딘데지 세는 코여서레 상구도 페이지 저디 인사레
So the person asking this question probably means the following. Usually, when a pleasant feeling arises, that gives rise to desire, that gives rise to attachment. Now, how come when this kind of attachment arises, an attachment that focuses on one's own benefit? So how does that connect to the I? I mean, if there was no connection to the I, how would that kind of attachment arise? So it's important how these two connect.
가르송고르스 어디간라 랑주의 디워지디간라 디워디 수수 냥수 용고로 다 디워디 두다부지 이미 온도 담보이나 나서 미진된의 수 이동이 통디간라 수디 수수 통고로 수수 이용도 통교래 이용도 통 랑기 통교어디 랑기 통하다 랑기 미기 통하디 랑기 통하다 세상 랑기 통하디 디지 진제네 아니 수를 미빈 되샤디 내용고로 디지라 디나시 초디워디 수 말에디 다 초디워디 초의 냥수 용고래 생기 냥수 용고래 랑기 생기 냥수 용고래 랑기 용고래 랑기 용디간다 디워임버 디워임버 냥수 용고래 그래서 디워임버 냥수 용디간다 랑기 용고래 랑기 지부 초고래 나 지부도 사 ngal dibu yungudu ngal pimba yungudu nga jibudu sa nga jibudu jibalas nga jibalas egi sangluti le yungu res ke du di ma le ba che jinen de cha chi sa min du se ta kanda ro nga jibu yungudu ngal ta ke du di je nang da tu nang da ga nang da wi le di go ta ga nang di su la ga nang le go sa ran le go ro ran la ga ye nawa chi dang de nawa chi dang 지부인배 나오지 그 뒤시 다 샤디고 용디고 그래서 딜라 때네 뇌자지를 마도 뇌자지의 유생시 쇼스거다 뇌자지의 유생 조디 나라 지부 연구도 세기 루티레 마도 베 디마인 버제 디원 용버 장 되자 지 주조 인바이나 아니 수 이동 로 통화장 년 통수 세즈 말다 랑기 통화장 만 인바지 시당니 수 이동 통화장 되자기 주조 인부지 되자지 주조 인부지但수 이동 통화장 되자지 주조디 인바이나 랑기 통무고지르다 랑기 통송 세디 랑기 통화디 되자지 주조디 만 인바지 랑기 통화 나라 랑기 나와 세조라 랑기 나와 년낭수 년통수 세기 나 세기 루디다 만제버 지시네 이동어 통화장 뇌자지에기 주인바이나 아니 가상아 수学얘기 수 이동어 통화장 뇌자기 주조레베 디나 미신다기 이동어 통디강라 아니 나조라 뇌자지이레베 이동어 통화디 여러 왔어 이동어 통화 요디 랑기 엄부기 통화디 요 말했으나 랑기 엄비 시베기 통 년통송 세기 디 매바이나 디 장기 토니 되샤지 도를 배우나 주주 딘데지를 띠니 되샤지기를 배 생각 되어디 레기로 디 나가세디 루디 자고 라간다
For instance, if we're hungry or we're thirsty, then hunger and thirst and so forth, they arise in our continuum. So that means that then attachment arises. So attachment arises, well, because yes, there's this experience, there's a certain experience in this case. And so therefore we have this sense of well, happiness, there's a sense of happiness, we experience happiness, and that then gives rise to attachment. But the sense that the thing is like, what happens? We see something beautiful outside of ourselves, for instance. So let's say my eyes see something beautiful. When we say my eye sees something beautiful, that also means the eye sees something beautiful. So there's the sense, because my eyes see something, therefore right away the thought arises, I've seen this. And because I've seen this, a beautiful form, for instance, a beautiful visual object, seeing that, it gives rise to attachment. It gives rise to, well, attachment, just as a pleasant feeling, for instance, that arises in the mind, also gives rise to attachment. So in the sense that there's the thought, I just experienced this pleasant feeling, just as there's a sense I see this beautiful form. Well, likewise, when there's a pleasant feeling, there's a sense I experience this beautiful, this pleasant feeling. Now, in reality, it's the mind that experiences it, but based on that, the thought arises, oh, I'm experiencing something pleasant. I'm experiencing something wonderful. So that means that therefore the I is involved. The thought I is somehow involved. Every time there is a sense of I, and therefore attachment can arise. If there wasn't that sense, if there weren't that sense of I, then this thought couldn't arise. It's always connected to that. If just seeing, for instance, a beautiful form, and that were sufficient, if just seeing something pleasant, if just in general a pleasant feeling were to arise without the thought I, then it would mean that even if another person sees a beautiful form, if someone else has a pleasant experience, attachment should arise. However, that doesn't happen because as soon as the experience has arisen, the I is somehow involved. So as soon as there's something, a pleasant form, a pleasant feeling, whatever is the trigger for our attachment, well, it's only triggered if we have the sense of I. So there's a connection to the I. There's a connection to uh, the thought, I just experienced that. I just saw that.
랑기 미기 넘버 씹어 요러 나주 미요 미 랑기 미기 넘버 씹어 디기 이동어 통제 아니 랑기 미기 넘버 씹어 디기 이동어 통화 인라 랑기 이동어 미통어세 되지 샤투유에는 메나 是吧？ 수이도 다 디테일시 디순에 누구도 가서 그래 상로마 데지 세버츠기 수리지 디 멤버 있는 세부지 차사 말해 다 미기 넘버 10이 수수기 미기 유이동의 통소나 다디 랑기 이도 거디디 수수기 생기 나로라 녜 통송 녜 이용 통송 상배 루디 레기리 말 레뱅이버 요르요 말해 디티오지리로 미기 통송들이다 미기 넘버 10에 이동 통화 디장지 디장 디장의 때에 다랑기 토네 내 이동 통송세 디 통수디 디장지 조버레베 랑기 미기 이용도 통 랑기 이용도 마통와 근데 요르베 요 말이스 연당부 뒤로다
Now, if, for instance, our eye consciousness sees some pleasant object, is it possible in that moment that the thought arises, I don't see something beautiful? So my eye consciousness perceives something beautiful, perceives a pleasant object, but I personally think, oh, I don't see a pleasant object. Is that actually possible? Well, Rinpoche says it's something to consider. It's something to debate about, actually. So, in the sense, is it possible that my eye consciousness perceives any object, anything, some visual object, without myself experiencing the certainty that I've seen something, without myself having the thought, I've seen something? So, is it possible to just see something without giving rise to the sense, I just saw something or I see something?
근데 샤투기 유나메나 로 랑기 미기 넘버 10에 유디 용도 통 야면은 근데 라야레 랑기 미기 넘버 10에 이동 인베 수디 통 이나야 라니기디 이동 인바 마통바 랑기 디 이동 인바 마통바 랑기 디 이드 명원 인베 원진 유바 강사 라니기 쓰거다 다 강사 랑기 미기 넘버 10에 통라 강사 라니지 이동도 미통와 딘데기 체버지 용거를 연구 말이스 저 디체버 시어 있나리다
So, therefore, what we need to analyze in this context is whether it's possible to have an eye consciousness, to have a mind, a sense consciousness, for instance, that perceives something without the thought arising, I've just seen something. So, let's take the case of our consciousness perceiving anything, apprehending anything. Is it possible that the thought doesn't arise, that there is no sense of I having seen something? Is that actually a possibility?
에딜라 간다 랑기 이동 통화디 통화디 매워이나 수수녜 이동 통구도 세디 녜 통구도 랑기 용어도 통화디 사시다버지 디 시자다버지 디 매워이나 아니 미기 가르 통바이나레 나의 가르 군나레 디장지 뇌차 장토야디 뇌차기 유조디 창투기 요 말이스 베나 랑기 디 이도 명원이 뭐 문진여버이나 녜디 두자 통구도 슬로이나 랑기 디 두자 임보 통구여버시 다나시 가스고래다 랑기 디 이도 명원이 뭐지 통구여버시 통화디 수수기 초기여버시 다 딘제기 유지를 미네 뇌차 지사라기로 했어 랑로 뉴도 상베 로 상루디 유세기 유딜 미네 거디딘 되샤 용거베 다디 가르다딘 거래 그래서 랑로 핑기도 랑로 핑기도 녜 야부 통구도 세기 딘제기 루지 유베 토네 차단 내용도 마도 나로 뉴도 나란 저 가야면도 수수로 초 가야면 되지 야부 인베 라니기 디 야부 인베 문진 당 야부 레상상기 초양게 메데바 아니 다나시 파 수수기 통대디 수수 라니기 디 두자 임바 통대지 다나시 디 수수를 녀버쟁이 임바 통대버지 수수 통화스 거다다 랑기 미기 통화도 수수 통화디 제버지 요구베 소리도 간다 미기 가르 통화는 많던데 제버 게면도 다 수수기 디 랑을 녀제 임바 통 랑을 두자 지기 임바 통 신도 딘제기 통의 유딜의 미비 뇌자 지사라그래 왜스 어디서 걸다.
Therefore, without the I, the self perceiving something, without there being the sense, without there being that basis of I've just seen something, without having that thought, whatever the I consciousness sees, it will not give rise to attachment. It will not give rise to desire or any other afflictions. Therefore, it's pretty clear that unless there's the thought, oh, I've seen this as being negative, I've seen this, I've just perceived this as something disadvantage, as a disadvantage. I've just seen this as harmful and so forth. I've seen this as something that is not attractive. So without that thought arising, it doesn't matter what the sense consciousness is perceive. It doesn't matter what any other mind perceives. In that sense, the I is always involved. Otherwise, would that be possible? Would that be at all possible to have attachment towards an object, to develop detachment towards an object, having seen it with the I consciousness, seeing a present object with the I consciousness, for instance, but without having the thought, I've just saw this, this is good for me, I find this attractive. Well, actually, that not being the case, unless there is this thought, I like this, I don't like this, and so forth, no way that any of these minds can arise, afflictive minds can arise. So whether it's attachment or aversion. So what does this show? The thought I is always involved. There's always a sense of I that has to be involved. The I considers something beautiful. The I considers something good, considers something to be good or not, having that thought at the very least, then that gives rise to attachment. The I consciousness perceiving it itself is not important. That itself is not enough. That is not enough. So Rinpoche says, well, he's not sure this is what the person means.
一下，아니 겐 계산 텐제 송송아, 나랑기 풍보 당 크랑기 풍보 케바요 말에 풍보 짬르바, 차상 풍보 짬레. 아니 이는 양르바, 나랑기 풍보 나랑 초와요레, 크랑기 풍보 나랑 초와 나라 초와요 말에. 디인도유 니 풍보 당 크랑기 풍보 찌빠찌가 말이다. 강인스나
Yeah, so the Chinese translator interprets the question, which Rinpoche I think also agrees is the original meaning, that the question. Oh, Rinpoche says yes, this is true. This is true. So she just said, okay, sorry, I couldn't translate it.
제가 제디간라 풍부장을 했어야지. 풍부장을 미네. 뇌자지기 말에 풍부지기 말에스. 풍부장 많이 버지 풍부디 디 딘도 나이 풍부 세지 러윤디간라 아니 차단지에기 무디 조용 거래서 나이 풍부 세지. 다 풍부장을 미네 차단지외이나 전다 우마디 디스요 당가서 가서 장상 다 공다 송장 인사 지제는 레버 충동의 소리도 된다 우마디 풍부장을 때네 차단지 매버디 다 세부디 가려요래 러디간라 베나 미치레지는 가수강의 슈바 이너다 주바 진구강의 슈바 이나 ngula 주바 슈도 ngalong랑도 시제 자와 내내 상사라고 말했지 디 상무디 용식이 말했다 ngula 주바 슈도 시제네 근데 미지용의 주바지 키용 구성 주바지 키용 꾼즈 주바지 키용 아니 가수 ngula 슈가 레베이나 가수 롱랑거 롱랑베 카도디를 간데 랑도 시제 수수로 추칼로네 따두강라 ngula juba juga legdo ngalong langdo ngula juba juga lezang 아니 가수를 ngalong langdo 시지네 상루디 레당디 텐데 자원이 요 말이스 오늘 간데스 푼도 사그레스 러디간라 네 ngula juba juga 용구도스 ngal라 슈가 용구도 시지네 로 ngula 슬라위는 ngal라 슈가 용구도스 코 나간라 슈구도스 ngu간라 슈구도스 ngal라 슈구도스 세상 랑라 슈바 주센티 디 주센데 체네 아니 콘두지에 구티네 조용구도 마도 ngula 슈구도 세지니 롱 람바이나 아니 구 gu kante chi le shu ne kundu lang gu ra, da jiba jiba mara be ro. Gu le shu ye di ju chen zo yi na, chirang gu le shu ne, gu le shu go re, ngen gu le shu ne, gu le shu go re. Sheza dinde yin zang, kundu saya yin gu di, nga la shu du, nga la du ja le du, nga la nang ju dung du si chi ne, nga se gi lu di dan di ni yung. Di pa che chi chi ne, ngula du juba shu du 아니 풍불라 두자르도 시지네 군도 랑사라금도 스거다 알랭엘 디지 상당다 안 다기 티어티에디 딘티어 개민도디 미신다기 초도 수수 초는 저 요리스는 수지민도 응문지나 미신다기 초래 수수 초래 디 미신다기 둥에디 수수 초그래 니 초디 그 초그래서 디 랑이 매봐 문지나 디디 디 티어디 간데스 레고 왔다로 나조 단다 제바제디 콩두 지역인 구 간데스 주구도 뇌자 지역인 구디 간데스 내용구도 간데지는 구주는 뇌자 내용구도 시지네 디제바 지고르마도 미신다기 수불라 강에 체디 디기 초디 미신다기 수불라 나사유비 마디와 나사유비 가서 그러다 강에디 수수기 용그레스니 요마디 용구 말에 수수 수불라 마디와 차디 수수기 초고 말했지 딜랑이 요 말에 수수 수불라 마디와 차디 마디와 차서야 그런 치다랑로 마디와 차서라디 나서 세나로라 강에지 초기에 따로 마디와 초르서야 되로 시그런 세상 디 디다 차당 지역이 주천 조디 나오 향비 루단 디구르세 디니 바루란 디오 가리오 문제는 파티오 당고에르시야 디 출디오 차금 민도 상상르시 예 근데 초디기도 세부 차선 예라디
So the Chinese translator said, well, she didn't think that was the the question the person had. She said, Rinpoche said yesterday that all there is mere aggregates. So whether it's our own aggregates or another person's aggregates, there's no separate self that can be found. And Rinpoche said, yes, of course, that's what it means. However, here we need to look at we need to look at how does desire arise? How does attachment arise? So Rinpoche said there's no contradiction with regard to the explanation that the Chinese translator just gave and the way Rinpoche looked at the answer. But then Rinpoche said, well, anyway, it's the evening, so Rinpoche may get confused and his brain is not working as well because it's already late. But the point is that Rinpoche feels it's the question really deals with this question about how does attachment arise in the first place. So how come that although there's just the aggregates, nevertheless we have desire. So Rinpoche this time took another example. He says, let's say someone hits us with a stick, so comes into this room and without us thinking of anything particular, well, then getting hit with this cane, for instance, with a stick or with a cane, well, then we get angry. Anger arises. So if we look at ourselves in that moment, we get hit by the cane, by the stick, and in that moment, what happens exactly? How do we get from experiencing the pain of being hit to anger? Well, if you look at ourselves in that moment, what happens is we get angry because there's a sense I was hit. It's not just the fact that this body was hit, but it's about associating it with my body, thinking it's my body, so the I was hurt because the body was hurt, and therefore we get angry. So was the cause of anger mainly the cause of anger is mainly the thought I. It's that thought I was hurt. That is the trigger. It is not the pain itself. It's not the unpleasant feeling itself. So we should think about this first. Of course, it's true that We are just aggregates. The other person is just aggregates. But the question we need to find out, like, how did this question arise? Well, why did this person have this particular question? And what are they what and how does attachment arise? So in the context of this other person's question, we need to analyze, how did attachment arise? How did anger, or how does attachment arise? How does anger arise? Now, no one is saying that we experience the feelings of another person. Of course, we don't experience. I don't experience what another person feels, and the other person doesn't feel or doesn't experience what I feel. But it's not just about the feeling. It's not just about the experience. It's not just about the experience of happiness, a pleasant experience or an unpleasant experience. That's not the point here, whether we experience each other's feelings or not. The point here is, as soon as there's the thought I, based on a previous feeling. So first there's the feeling of being hit, for instance. There's a pleasant feeling after seeing an attractive object. So just that does not lead to attachment. It's the thought, oh, I experience the pain. I was hurt. My body was hurt. Or I see something beautiful. This benefits me. Only then attachment can arise. Therefore, so Rinpoche repeated that a few times, whether we experience something pleasant or someone else experiences something pleasant and I don't experience it, the point is really that the experience itself doesn't trigger the attachment. There must be the thought, I just had this experience. I just saw something pleasant. I just experienced pain. So when that arises, when that thought arises, then anger, then attachment can arise. Anger or attachment, depending on which one it is, can arise.
다 뒤로 랑기 야부 인바양 기 초기 매봐 야부 인바의 기 시기 매봐 두자 인바의 기 시기 매봐 라니 딜 뚜디 장년기 초와당 장년 지 장부 레상바다 님바 레상베 상로 가야 매베 다 라니 지스거다 랑기 다 다긴 아주 미기 야부 통네 수수 야부 통데 니와 요르베스 디게지 레송 디쿠 알랭엘의 주시 신다도 마송 다샤 다 수수라니 위딜라 야부레 삼바야 자오니 메바시 두자레 삼바야 자오니 메바시 틴제기 장년지 넘버 2바 가야 메세기 위치를 미네 야는 되차 야는 시당지에 요르베 지사군이라고 거디 수수디 야부레 삼바야 요 말에 디기 펜투도 삼바 딘데 가야 메바시 두자레 뉴도 삼바야 가야 메바시 딘제기 가야 메데베 유땅 유바마치 유바마스라고이나 잠브레 님버레 삼바 가야 메디스 딜러지 딜러 미베 상로 가야 메디스기 메베 유딘데지르 미네 데샤지야 당 시당지야 디용구도베 디용 용사라게르베 engel 저디지 디상당고
Now, what we need to contemplate, what we need to analyze, here is, well, if the thought, for instance, if there's no thought whatsoever, this is good for me, this is bad for me, and on the basis of that, so on the basis of a feeling, like a certain feeling arises, on the basis of that feeling, this benefits me, this harms me. If that thought does not arise, so here we're not talking about the experience of the sense consciousnesses, for instance, as previously, Rinpoche has talked about it previously, about the sense consciousnesses. So what do they experience? What do they see? That's not what we're considering here. So they see whatever they see, the sense consciousnesses experience something beautiful or not. The point is here, without the thought, oh, this is good for me, this is bad for me, this harms me, this is nice, this benefits me, and so forth. So without that thought, basically the object that is taken to mind is neutral, because it's neither considered to be good for the eye nor bad for the eye. Can attachment or aversion really arise? That's what we need to analyze.
랑기 생의 동에 유봐 다 랑기 신년도 칸이 말어디가나 진년도 말어랑 러스 디 말어니 러서라고 믿다 랑기 신라 동에 taking 버지 랑기 류라 동에 taking 버지 랑기 류라 동에 taking 유의 양 류센니라 강에 수킨 있는 양 랑기 유디 딘데기 강에 수킨 티 랑기 류센니라 강에 수킨 제 상베 상루 매바 이나 라니기 유디 랑기 류센니라 강에 수킨 제 상바 매바체 된라 류센니라 강에 수기여바체 다 딘데기 유지 다 용구로 용시 버와 다 딘데기 유디를 미네 차당 지리 가 차당 가사 시당 지리 왜서나 그래서 뒤지 말해서 거다 수수 생기나로 콩알라 쿠잉에 류센니라 강에 수킨데 레 상베 상루디 메나 수수딜라 롱라디 용구 말해 롱랑시 말해서 거다 다 다기 되어지당 뒤제와이나 수수기 뒤 쿵알라 강에 수킨데 상베 상루 메나야 쿠기 수수라 강에 수버 장지 아니 디장 주진데 제니 쿨로 쿵두 사고르슬라와이나 아니 하잔 대고 왔다 다디 세부차서 페이지티 코랑 되어디 인사래 로아 다 디레베스 다디 디티고르베스 다 딘데이나 아니 나수 상단 가서 상을 신다 동아요 다디라
So let's say there is a problem. There is something that happens to mind or body. So in some way, let's say someone harms my mind or harms my body. But without one's mind, without our mind having the thought, I was harmed. So I have to say I here, Rinpoche says, I have to use the word I here, but without the thought, I was harmed. When some harm is inflicted on body or mind. Without this sense, oh, something good just happened or something bad happens, I have a problem here. Without that thought, how could aversion arise? So in actuality, mind or body are being harmed. So in actuality, someone, for instance, harms the body. There is an unpleasant feeling that arises in the body. But this being the case, nevertheless, if the thought, oh, I have a problem now, or someone injured me, for instance, without that thought, no way can aversion arise. So it's not about the problem itself, it's about the thought, I have a problem. Without that thought, anger or aversion, it's just impossible for them to arise. So I think Rinpoche says that is the question of this other person. So we have different feelings, we have different experiences, different sensations in the body, in the mind. They themselves are not sufficient. Just having these sensations without the thought without the thought I'm being harmed, I'm being benefited, and so forth, will not trigger any afflictions. So therefore, we need to adopt another kind of attitude. If that's the case, that this thought triggers these particular afflictions, or this reaction of like, I've been harmed, I've been benefited, that triggers any of the afflictions, well, then we need to change our attitude.
다디이나 하장 태도로 가레스 어디 간라 쿠기 자체 딜을 띠네 수수기 류신라 류르 펜버디 용구여버시 된라리다 이나양 수수기 뭐네 미디 수수라 네버쟁이지라 문진여버시 디 용거로 아주 너네 띠네 뭐뭐 용거래 너 장도만 세베 가서 오다 창창 핀도지긴디 네버쟁이라 문진치 네버쟁이디 핀도지긴라 문진치 디 문어 자침부 주어 디 노트 자침부 수어 디로 그래서 딘데기 내추기 원에 된라 수수기 류라 펜바디 쿠치고레 생을 펜버디야 그 시고래 다 라바라바 치에는 룰을 펜버디야 그 제기월디 이나양 룰을 펜디고디 수수기 구 녀버쟁이지는 문제 제장 콜로 논는 것도 다디 간데스 용거리다 되는 펜투버 장진 되자 지기를 쓰려고이나 용마송하디
So actually, that's quite extreme, or there's some extreme cases. So let's say someone really harms us or really benefits us, but we may have an opposite kind of reaction. So sometimes we just simply don't recognize that someone is harming us, or we don't recognize that someone is benefiting us. So in actuality, harm is inflicted on us, or in actuality, someone benefits us. But we may actually get it the wrong way around, in that in actuality, let's say someone really benefits us, but we believe this person is harming us, or someone is harming us, and we believe that they benefit us. So we identify the situation in the wrong way. So let's say, Rinpoche says to take a rough kind of example. So someone benefits our body, benefits our mind in that way. But in we think, according to our own perception, or our own mind has the thought, oh, this is really harming me. This person harms me. This person is hurting me. And so forth. And as a result of that, we get angry with that person when their intention was to benefit us. And in fact, they actually did benefit us when they actually did benefit our body. And still, our reaction is a negative one because we misidentified the situation. We misidentified what actually happened. So if in reality we received a great benefit, but we believe that I was harmed, there's the thought I was harmed, then it triggers aversion, it triggers anger.
写章수수기디 야부인버 통어 야부인버디 수수기 출신바 그 야분도 상대로 수수기 녜디 야부 통구도 상마도 야면 수수기 디 야부 통어디 랑기 디 야부 통어디 다 뇌차 다 단단 가랑수를 찾으면 있는다 시당의 랑기 디 야부 통어장 뇌차 집에 주조레다 러시아 요마레 뇌차 방배 강사기양 유이동 통어디 요래 다 단단 가랑수를 찾으면 있나 뇌차당 시당당 나제 차도 라수바 단다 중세 장양 카마지버지 중세 장야마 슈차지니 가수를 너무 슈춘용 차 유베 강사디 많이 봐 다딜은 가서 수지 배바 내 담보 다 배바 쓰기로 수지 내 담보 다 나랑 수다버지로 차츠나 다 나랑 수기 디 이동 통화디 뇌자지 얘기 주조순지 나 요구를 스타디 많이 봐지 수수기 영어도 통화 매버지 된了 수수의 야부인바 디장 뇌자지 얘기 주인나 아니 되게도 디 하장 텐주도说된了 让你了 야부인바 디장 뇌자지 얘기 주조인바 이나 아니 지난군이 쿠디강라인 뇌자지지바 야면은 시당지지바 되고 말이베 된了 뇌쟁이다 된了 偏통인데 왜 바로 그래서 디 캔사고 휴창으로도 되디
Therefore, it's so important that I consider something to be good or bad. So in other words, we have the thought, oh, this is good for me, this is bad for me. It's without this thought that something is positive, something is negative, it's impossible for the afflictions to arise. Well, of course, just thinking this is good or bad, that in itself doesn't necessarily trigger the afflictions, because an arhat who's overcome attachment, who's eliminated the afflictions, well, they may also have the thought this is positive or negative. Here we're talking about someone who has a strong sense of an I, who's not overcome that sense of their own I. So as beginners, for us as beginners, when we see something as positive or negative, then the thought must arise. So, this is good for me, this is bad for me. But just experiencing harm, just being harmed or being benefited, that itself, of course, doesn't trigger an affliction, doesn't trigger certain reactions. For instance, when you're asleep, if while you're asleep someone benefits you, that doesn't give rise to attachment. Or if someone harms you, it's very well possible that people harm you while you're sleeping. Well, at that time, someone harming you, it doesn't give rise to fear, for instance. Therefore, for an ordinary person, it's very important to develop the thought, I receive harm, I've been benefited, before attachment, aversion, and so forth can arise.
다 유디기 수수의 디오제기 요바디 수수기 통수나 로 띵알의 디오제기레샤 띵알의 디오제기도 상바치 딘데지 초 딘데지 레사수나 랑기 이동원 통사리 딜라 딘데지를 랑기 이동원 통스거마도 딜레 루스 이동원 통해지게 요 말에 베는 미지 칼라심부지 디 딜레디네 초 디오지 냥수 용고레 제상 딘데지 이거라 오 퀸알의 칼라제송 아니 칼라심부 종송 두고 자송 시진이 상루디 레바 다랑기 딘데기 칼라쟁이디 수수라 디워쟁이 임버지 수수기 가서 다랑 통사리 디장기 아니 이 칼라쟁이디 디워쟁이 임버 통바다 이동원 임버 통어스 딘데지가 쓰고르마도 딜레 루수 랑기 이동원 통세지 요 말다 그응알라 칼라테스 nga 두고 자송 nga 지부 종송세 디장 유디 랑니기 이동원 통어스 딘데장라 다 라우지기래 딜러고다
Therefore, it's essential to have this thought. This is good for me. This is attractive, not attractive. This is good. This is bad. So, for instance, let's say someone gives us some really delicious food, which gives rise to a pleasant sensation while we eat the food. But that itself, that pleasant sensation, doesn't trigger attachment. It's rather the thought, oh, I just got some delicious food. I just got this great food. That in turn triggers a feeling which then induces, which then gives rise to attachment. In other words, based on this thought, oh, this is great food, I'm benefit from this great food, I can enjoy this great food. So the thought, I being connected to the pleasant food, that triggers a feeling, which in turn, a pleasant kind of feeling, which in turn gives rise to afflictions such as desire or attachment.
나비지 딘데지 민도 다 가서 가서 되샤 가야라 군 되샤 코랑기랑 뉴버 카리유바 유진 코랑을 따야지다 아니 되샤기 유디 되샤 지세기 유디 메다바다 동해랑신 다 아니 다 정말 있는 다음에 베랑신 상네 되샤 가야지 되샤지 고버지야지 가서 쉬인바 다도 쉬디간라 다 휴진에 뒤져단 되어요 니네 가르사다 난준 양 동주 양양니 뉴킨 드리지 임바이나 다 참에 구디 다 유샤샤 순리지리 제zan디 가상 간여자야지 가상 쉬미아버지 간여지 자나 진수야 가시 뒤준도 드네 군뉴킨 드네 많이 바이나 다 메다베랑신 레스지 로디간라 다 되샤 지용디간라 되샤기 위디 되샤 지세기 위디 지템베 템부다 이도와다 차 탄제네 리버 다부지다 엔다나 신기지 가서 그래 랑왕워 랑수투버지 쿠란기 무니 수랑 이동원 인버 초딩이지 랑수투비 이동원 인데버 딘데지 로 신로 뚜무고바 쿠란 이동원디 되만이 이동원 인바 강 따오부 롱투 유딜 따킹기 따오부당 야면의 롱죄버부 딘델 강라에 튜버 매버치시니 쿠란기 무니 이동원인버 투디버스데 딘데질 랑왕 투버스 랑왕도 투버스로 데 딘데질 통에 되샤지기여 인디간라 다 되샤디 가디간라 오 되샤기 지터 통화나시 되라 미네버레스 템베랑신도 통화디 띵부 마레 메다베랑신 레시싱 아수도스 这些原因吧。但没大别让些这些地卡都地了，我说没大把拉巴山一些的，长木山一些，你送给我的拉巴是来地方了，地卡都地了，你在上头吧人呢也不要的，级别他们修的是，是吧？也级别有的修给盯着我的，那么西上去的，咱们信着我的。你啥别他妈的谁不的，啥是他妈的啥别他的谁不的盯着我的是。你다른 타마 구해봤어. 아니 다르다르다시 타마디 냥구의 친치시 냥자 친치시네 아니 매워 차로 타마디 구해 두버리스 좀베 타마 태웠어. 가서 루루진 종지진에 야진 좀바디 진 망부지 왕긴 좀바레 진 딜고 뉴바딜 체요레. 로 아주 모바일이 루사바 나신레 루 가츠 사요바 있는 사바디 가츠 사바디 데이르마도 가출 사비 니바 딜레 게시지니 카바기 루디 데이미 도와셔서 디나시 좀바디 주진기 왕긴 좀바디 주진 좀베 주진기 니바 세르디 가나니 카체오리 좀베 타마 뒤베 타마 첼로스 이런 좀베 타마디 카체해 돼. 세상 디 메다베 메다바 라바 상단데 라바 디양 센의 코로이나 댄스지 메다온도 다 참무 상단도는 딜레장 한 디가도 디 조디 디송용 거다 다 간다 상제 중딩되기 디송도 당 알아서 단다 미친디기 나로는 종샤베 남미 빈체 임바이나레 수수기 깔레전이 사베 준우 농쇼 임바이나레 단다 사베 카툴라 깔레시부 저 하랑 디된다로 수수기 뉴바 차상 땅지시네 시부딘데 깔레전이 답에 가서 그래 시부지 자신 지지시네 배 뒤다도 농지네 베제당네 지 대저지 유에 순대지 된대지 요래디 전래 된대 용해 요 말이스 타마 오메드 카체고 바샤다 좋아 양면의 수수기 구조 샤는 되래 양면의 군조기 수수 샤는 되래 간들 나시지마도 지제는 상니인도 지제는 추세진이 지지의 인도 간들 오메드 카체는 누구에디 지버레스 오메드 샤니 누구에디 양의 쿠이 수수기 사비 주는 농쇼 디기 수수샤네 단 루슬로 벽에나다 근데 세당시오래 유 자라디 수수샤네 돼 양면은 수수기 자라샤네 돼레세 간들 오메드 샤네 누구의 샤다리 다 오메드 샤구디 간라 샤니 두나야 샤야레 샤니 마두나 샤야레 되나 샤야레 민되나 샤야레 제기요 말 딜레 단다 원 유베 카토라 구바 로 수수기 사비 자라 디제 제디 지 왕매의 카테고 투비 거라 민대신도 생了냥년의 동에 유해신배 투니 카테고 했던데 많이 봐 단다 유해신배 카도 딜라 된다 덴버시 파시오이나 된다 덴베 투니 파 카테지지미로 템바 유사기 쇼라 파당 기초了拼度有色修了爬档，阳明的去短大宁不有色，每次短的点不永远个修了爬档其实呢，短也被修了爬东亚地了，绿东是那这个位置，他短大有被进了当过度，短大有被进了你不得当因是其实呢，你让先参谋了拼呗，短大继续修了爬东北呢，他让往有被看多了，短大拼不加进不去心被拖呢。东土바로 와. 이 야슈티 중벌. 다 민대신도 류동고에 중디가라니 미주동네 같이 해들이. 다디 제요 말에. 다 사야라마소 동야라마소 아니 대야라마소 칸바 있는 칸바 야우 수수지. 다만데 대야라마소 시지. 미주동네 같이 해고 디가라디 도종선을 지러 와다. 디스고다. 다 뇌샤 가디가라 상 디수 땅의 가토. 도종是哪个月呗？
도경 치딩아 야보 교통이 말이다 호가이
도종应该是这样的，
남기는
今年哈古月，假期汉语我知道，这怎么说呢？亏你买的卡萨，活该，
네, 호가이
应该是活该吧？
난 남기는 호가이 된데 교기도 이냥 치디대즈 이 이제 뭐 영 말했다. 민도.
아니에요. 아니 시
라, let's say.
So, well, the point is, therefore, the I must be somehow involved. Anyway, so this completes Rinpoche's answer to that question, or answer, yeah, Rinpoche's response to this question. And then Rinpoche says he would like to continue with what he talked about yesterday, mainly how can we overcome attachment, so letting go of our attachment. In that context, how can we overcome our attachment? Now, what Rinpoche mentioned yesterday was how we should also look at the object itself, the object we have attachment for. So consider the fact that this object is impermanent, that this object is in the nature of suffering, and it lacks a self, it is selfless. Which then leads to the question, do these concepts, or understanding these concepts, does it help us to overcome our attachment? Well, these different concepts, such as impermanence, suffering, and selflessness, they connect to the Dharma. They're they're related to the Dharma, and for some that may be difficult to understand. It's not that easy to understand all these concepts. Well, let's just take one of them that may be a little easier, which is impermanent or impermanence. So when there's an object that may seem very beautiful and unchanging and stable, well, in actuality, it doesn't exist in that way. There is a sense that the object is exists in and of itself, that it's objectively beautiful, for instance. We have a sense that its beauty won't fade. There's a sense it exists in and of itself, just out there as beautiful. It's got nothing to do with our own mind. A sense that it's, yeah, from its own side, or objectively, this object is beautiful, this object is something good. And that leads to the sense of permanence, that it will always be like that. This inner sense that it's unchanging. So since it exists from its own side, it will never change. And that then gives rise to attachment. However, to overcome our attachment towards this object, we need to understand that it's in the nature of impermanence. It changes all the time. Now, when we talk about impermanence, there are two types of impermanence. There is rough or coarse impermanence, and then there's subtle impermanence. Now, if we just consider rough impermanence or coarse impermanence, what does that refer to? It refers to the coarse changes we can observe. For instance, the fact that after something is born or someone is born, they have to die. So birth is followed by death, to reflect upon the fact that, well, we'll die one day. Or the fact that something that comes into existence will eventually go out of existence. Everything that has been accumulated has to separate. Whenever there's a beginning, there must also be an end. So in that sense, well, if we accumulate something, there's also separation. So we could think about it from the point of view of, for instance, when we accumulate the power in our phone. So in other words, we recharge our phone. So there's now power in our phone. We accumulated that power in the sense. Well, eventually our phone will have to be recharged again. Whatever power we kind of added into the phone, it will eventually be exhausted. So in that sense, whatever we accumulate when we apply causes and conditions that brought something about, well, when these causes and conditions are not constantly replenished and not constantly newly accumulated, then that result will eventually go out of existence. So this is true for people coming together and having to separate, but also for something like a phone and so forth. Anyway, so whatever comes together, whatever exists at some point will eventually separate, will eventually go out of existence. And this is just a coarse kind of way of looking at impermanence. On a subtler level, just the fact that everything changes constantly, well, this is even more so that nothing ever remains the same. However, so in that sense, therefore, it's important to understand that whatever we do, so we have a family, we raise a family, we work so hard to make money, to accumulate wealth and so forth. And there's maybe the sense that it'll always be like that. There's a sense in our mind that we will be able to continue to enjoy this. But in reality, we'll have to separate. There's like no way that one day we won't have to separate from these objects we work so hard to acquire. Maybe tomorrow, maybe just in a few hours. And it's important to learn this. It's important to understand this, that things will eventually disappear. So there's a Tibetan saying, either the thing leaves me or I leave the thing. So whichever way it is, we'll have to separate from the things we've accumulated or we consider to be precious. And there's really very little control. There's this lack of control. We eventually, without any control, we have to separate from things. So it's important to consider that, to be prepared, basically, to prepare for that, and to make our possessions meaningful. So in a way, to have the thought, oh, we'll use this to benefit others. So either to give it away or to plan at least to give it away eventually, or use it for others, use it for the benefit of others. So in that way, we make it meaningful. It becomes meaningful to have these possessions if their usage is dedicated to the welfare of other sentient beings. If, on the other hand, we don't do that, well, we may not even be able to enjoy these objects. So they don't benefit ourselves, they don't benefit anyone, any other person, and so in that way, they're really wasted. So thus, it's important to learn to be able to give them up to use them in a meaningful way. So if without giving up or without utilizing something, for instance, we're having a house, for instance, without utilizing it in a positive way, then no one will benefit. So as Rinpoche said earlier, we may not even be able to stay in the house, or we may not be able to really use it and no one else can use it. So there is no benefit for anyone. And there was this discussion Rinpoche had with the Chinese translator about the word dukyong. So kind of experiencing having personal disadvantage. So there's a Chinese term apparently, but that Rinpoche uses, but the Chinese translator felt that wasn't a really good term to use in this context.
没问题。按底下呢这个卷面图，但真的主要让我对最呢，就是大球图。但第一大刚的。
So yeah, so Rinpoche says he'll continue with explanation later on.
律动吐没吐了啥来的下是，律动谁的别开心不来下，估计少不来下是，像律动样个团大的卡着人是，律动过为就相当，律起的动的去，这就这点我就写不了，律动完了，加拿大有过呀民度，越没去被团大呀没马嘞，龙卷没去被团大呀马嘞，上路动荡的加拿大了。搭档的，加拉的看开始大不节是初步大不节，刚那就呢下一的给是的嘛的，看到上路托呢加拉的了当真阶段的，菜的点么就水果都是，他看到570几了，卡丢的，这个准备那里，有个准备那里，两个准备那里，说我让你给两年龙卷不的。570的拼度70呢，数据了嘛这个些两图面积，现了这年拼度70呢，被拼度70个的了被这去呗，说生个囊落了，就汤个图你的，这图啥的，这图了嘛图了，顺着顶这一边，就赢了没了，顺着没有些，你现在去了怕这位呢，570个顶这去了呢，还说过这。这下去的，这图下去呗，怎么你都绿当呢？绿生个囊路了，马丢中山上 정세 장에 매베 돈이 파这拖下去的，我顶这给他上路去了，律动嘛，谁去了？第阶段，加拉库朗约不的卷是开嘛的，我约不涨卷是开嘛的，我的了新价钱呢，你卡说绿大嘛多不是，我绿大嘛多不，我的了新级差呢，呃。让你记得对吧？过年工资批下当，短大约为学了东马图吧。我顶天穷呢，你不接，你别让心强入多。嗯
So Rinpoche said at the beginning of this segment, he said, well, there's something else I want to discuss, but I'll do it later. Anyway, so far, or yesterday, Rinpoche spoke about letting go. So why should we let go? How can we let go? What is the manner by which we should let go? In what way should we let go? So here, letting go does not mean to give everything away. It doesn't mean we cannot have certain things. It doesn't mean we cannot enjoy something. But rather, it's important when we have certain things, for instance, that we change our attitudes towards them. There's a particular attitude we need to adopt. In other words, we have to use these objects wisely. And if there's something, for instance, that benefits us greatly, so when it comes to keeping something or giving it away, well, if there's an object that greatly benefits us, it doesn't benefit as much others, but it benefits ourselves in a profound way. Of course, we should keep it. We should keep it and use it wisely. If, on the other hand, we own something, we own an object that doesn't really benefit us, but it could greatly benefit someone else, we should give it to someone else. We should give it up. So here, what does it mean here? How should we behave here? For instance, if something like that happens, if the situation occurs, such as if a situation occurs, such as it's an object we own really benefits another person. So without regret, we should just give it away. Understand that it doesn't really benefit us, it greatly benefits the other person. And with that attitude and without regret, should give it away. That is letting go. But we're not saying that there's anything wrong with owning things, having certain possessions or having money. Those are not the problem. The problem is our attachment, having attachment towards these objects, being attached to them. That is the main problem. With that attachment in particular getting stronger, which really harms us.
不如大一点拉顺，刚才就弄龙血了，心机差不多的，绿大嘛多去心机差不多的，俺最近上了东当当那个街当的，肯定的我去使用过的是对讲了，新价钱为第一，新怕绿当推啊的，怕这推啊，今天的卡说的，今天买不起。上路的了，恰节今年，怕这嘛图吧，有嘛图吧，听得起，预备定度，让你的心情恰备，新价节色的，就那东西的，让你对不学了当，叔叔的刚懂对设计当，刚进对不有设计学了东西，的嘛多呗，的周节嘛多，对我们图呢，呃，拼图卡的有没？上了当呢，拼不有色说。短大我们拼图卡哇有的，第二当古都上边上路第二图过的，哦，你当那俺搞不都是，叔叔搞不有事了，人顶着现在俺搞不的，俺基本用过的是，顶着个，对，上路南路了，对吧？卡的有没的租界嘛都，全我们图呢，拼图加起中卡的用个有没，大几千年。东亚当，北京东亚的用个要嘛的，现在，我给弄这用的，对吧？起码都，短大我们几位呢，或者弄了龙血色地主这的，北京东当也不穷不赢呢，的古有的，的拼多也不学了，怕东亚， 동해 요로 랑신 참말로 핀도 요 잠블리를 핀도 요 봐. 딘데기 쇼라 파 동해 요래. 그래서 디 잠블리를 핀도 요베 쇼라 파 동구도 디 동기 삼루 루디 요베 있나? 류동세기 된다. 가르디 창기도 어디를 디 창기 요다.
Now, with regard to wealth, possession, objects of enjoyment, well, the thing is, we're not able to let go usually. We're unable to overcome our attachment. So here, this is not about just giving away these objects, giving them away, giving them to other people, but rather it's about working with our own attachment. So not being able to give them up usually means that we don't really consider, is this object or are these objects, these things, are they truly beneficial? We're not able to really realistically reflect on that. Rather, we're guided by our own desire. We're guided by our own desirous thought in the sense that, oh, I want this, this is good for me, or I like this, and so forth. So in the sense, we're not really considering the true benefit, but we're just driven by our desire. We're just driven by certain desirous thoughts. However, if we're able to kind of step back from that kind of desire, and instead of just being guided by what we want, what we don't want, and really in an objective way think, is this really beneficial? Does this really benefit me? Do I really need this? Is it maybe beneficial for others? So my possessions, my wealth, my objects of enjoyment, if they benefit others more, if they benefit maybe the whole world. So being willing to share them with others, having that willingness, I can give those to others. I could benefit them with that. Just being able, just having that sincere thought, um, I can give this to others. I would give it to others. Well, then that's actual letting go, having that kind of attitude. So it's less about really giving things away. That's not the solution to the problem. It's the solution is this willingness, this openness to giving it to others, sharing it with others. And then if it still benefits us, keeping it is okay, but it's we're not here governed by our desire, but rather by a sensitive kind of attitude as to whether it's beneficial or not. A sensible kind of attitude. So we're rather guided by a sensible attitude, understanding that it benefits us. And so keeping it is okay, but it's important to have the right kind of attitude and to be willing to give it up.
盲目用缺这些，但주치 왕세웨이나的律动员的了，变得亲的就那龙血当人家扩儿那龙血的出来，恰比路拉巴的律当突围呢，扩当那的龙血的出这的律当突围呢，亲的吧，律当突围呢，比较难路了，去不是那个说，亲的了恰呢，신디를 심바이는 추바 미시 난징한 수티 송고로 시장 신디이 투쿠사당 윤노롱주 딜러 차베 루디 가투나 추바 찬도 거래 다 딜레야 도스 딘서브 제베이나 랑된라 차바 랑기 된라 차바스 다 랑기 된스라 고거래 랑이라 차바 랑라 차바세다 랑라 차바딘 되자 창민 나로기 되자기 자오순의 차디 거래 나우 냠비 루디 유디강라 디기 지라 랑라 차비 차바틀리 용고레 랑라 차비 차바스는 되기도 랑니라 신자 제조로 딜레 용디강라 랑기 데월라 신자 레용고레 딜레 용디강라 데월 두제기 주지 데월 랑라 데월 테킹기 주더 진 디소라 신자 레용고레 딜레 용디강라 랑라 데월 테킹기 주진 디소 제딜라 게진 체용디 쿵두 사이드 용고를 세상 디 용디강라 랑니의 차비 차바디 류당 투바당 디파 가야기 배선 제외이나 다 기본 등기趋势的 연구도 타바 주의趋势 연구도 기본 등기趋势 만의 기본 총기趋势 기본 등기趋势거 다 간들 타바 주의기 타바디 어디니 연구도 랑의 차비 파 가투바이나 다 랑의 차비 차바디 가투바 장的 마세让端的新的你给囊路了，新的端做自己的，让给端的参谋路拍不及了，今年新端做了自己，申请探这个端大的做了今年，让你申请探这个又不达不及了，他他说的上了当几年，申请探这个小学中年说的记了上了当年，你让你绿党图不赢呢，他让你的差不绿党是个嘛的。생진 탄제기 된다 조진에 라니 생진 탄제기 체도 내가 진행지를 파 류당 투웨이나 생진 탄제기 샤슈 중이지 상지지 된대기 배 루타지 제도는 아니 지부 진부기 취차용도 세상 류당 세들을 뭐 망부 용도도 간다 류당 세 된다 띵서부 수수 상리 양양 담보이나 바랑기 투네 고 망부지 다 레투도
Now, when we talk about letting go, well, there are actually many different levels of letting go. So when we talk about the main way, the main kind of aspect of letting go, well, considering, for instance, this life's object. So the objects that we possess, our wealth, objects of enjoyment, our reputation, um, um, our friends, our relatives, and so forth. So being able to let them go, so letting go of our attachment towards them, that is also described as offerings. So it becomes an offering. We make an offering in the sense that if we can let go of our attached mind, our mind, the mind that is attached to our body, mind, our objects of enjoyment, our wealth, our family, and so forth, if we can give that, if we have the willingness to give them up, or be able to give them up, that is seen as a kind of offering. Now, that's one way in which we're basically overcoming our attachment, especially towards the objects we own, the objects we enjoy on a daily basis. And then there is another type of letting go, which is letting go of the attachment towards ourselves. Now, when we say attachment towards the self, well, basically we're talking about cherishing ourselves, considering ourselves being self-obsessed or being self-centered, which is a type of attachment to the self. It's that kind of being attached to the I. Or being attached to one's own happiness. So when we talk about this self-centered attitude, that is the mind attached to oneself and attached to one's own happiness, which in turn, if there's anything that prevents us from experiencing this happiness, if anything were to destroy the causes and conditions that give rise to our happiness, well, we'd feel aversion. We would feel aversion towards that particular object. So here the point is that therefore, when we want to let go in this context here, we're trying to let go of the attachment to the self, attachment to one's own I. And that kind of attitude, that giving up, is associated with the person, with the person of middling spiritual capacity. In other words, someone who aspires towards becoming liberated. That's another aspect of letting go. And then there's a third aspect that, with regard to our own benefit and the benefit of others, well, among these two, or of these two, a person who's more concerned with the welfare of others. So being concerned for all other sentient beings, or being concerned for the being interested or being working towards the benefit of all sentient beings. In other words, becoming a servant to sentient beings. So giving up our own benefit in that sense and replacing it for the benefit of others. So this is not just about overcoming attachment to the self, but rather giving up our own benefit, the aim being the benefit of all other sentient beings, which is even higher. It's a higher form of giving up.
배는 수수지 나외 카도라양 다 수수 류동토에 매버이나 다가 나기도 시진에 로 생기 나로를 제마도 땅을 가르치고래 가르치하그래 간대 용그래 상니 가르치하그래 나니 가르치하그래 시베 시우지 난다 레네 깔래카고 시우차기도 다 딜레 수수 미지레 에 나나양 신진기 체도 나오쇼 수수기 나사디 신진을지 핀도 용어쇼 수수 나사 용해디 수수기 중임버지 사바리 다 중임버 사비 진지 딘데 용버리 딘데 윤디가로 중임버 사야디 아까 중민도 시신딜라 에 저거 지야당 샤동지야 아니 다나신기 수수라 나사 유버 딜러 미네 딜러 떼네 아니 랑단 자유 동에다 랑레 나사 딜레장 자다유디긴 신진디줄 니지공야 간다 수수 나나양 나와디 신진기 나체 신진신기 나체기 구취 도야지다 신진신기 나사 나야기 띠 가서 군다부지 취도바쇼 수수 수행의 양 신진기 된지 신이 또 침에 있는 신진기 된지야 간다 신진을 가뒤 있는 신진을 핀토버지 용야 용어 수디 용야 가서 우리 용토야기 상로 동기 상부지로 다리야 디상다 상니야 디상 당시 간다 마시비신디라 지 신진을 핀버 용야 디상 당기 상치시니 딜러 리버 딩지니 몽발라 신진 탄지기 된다 제통이 지 용야 인구 단단히 주기 시신 유세 신진이 제도 바 동샤나 디 신체디 총주도 신체 총주에 디다 수수 나서의 준용질을 통대지로 군내거지기 나서를 시라시라스 게할래면도 상상순리지 디 루더 세나 니도 진부지 야래지 딘데기지 상순리 초순리지 레토에지 디 용토에도 디 용바이나 핀도 진부 말해 나나야 계산 만나나야 계산 디 상동에 들어진 돈도 디 당샤나니 핑기도 어디
So if we're not able to let go, for instance, well, then when we get sick, when we feel sick, then at that time we won't be able to bear that illness. We won't be able to bear the pain and so forth. The thought arises, what am I going to do? What happens? What happens to me tomorrow? What happens to me now? They'll be worried. We'll be worried about the situation right now. We worry about what is to happen in the future, which gives rise to a lot of fear. If, on the other hand, we learn to let go, we can make that disease, that illness, we can make it meaningful. We can adopt the thought, for instance, I'm getting sick for the benefit of others. I'm taking on the pain of others, for instance, visualizing that I take on the suffering of other sentient beings while we are sick, or reflect on the fact that I got sick because I accumulated the causes and conditions. I engaged in non-virtuous and harmful actions, and as a result of that, I'm now experiencing this illness. And so we use this illness as a form of purification. Consider that to be a purification of these negative causes and conditions we've accumulated in the past. We may even take our illness as a cause, or we may think about this illness in such a way that we compare it to other people who are even sicker than we are, who have even more problems. So understanding what it feels like being sick on the basis of our own sickness, and then generating compassion for those who are even sicker, who have even more problems. And in that way, we can use our illness to meditate on compassion for others. So even we're sick, even we're not feeling well, we can help other sentient beings. It will benefit other sentient beings. We can generate the aim or the kind of motivation, whether we're alive or whether we're dying, may be for the benefit of other sentient beings. So dedicating ourselves for or working for the benefit of other sentient beings. Even the thought, oh, may I not die, may I get better so I'll be of greater benefit for other sentient beings, that becomes a virtuous kind of thought because it is dedicated towards others. May I also in the future help others, and may the sickness be used for others. So, with this attitude, we develop a kind of courage, we develop a kind of inner strength and determination that keeps us going. So, in that way, it has a great advantage. We can use any kind of situation, whether it's positive or negative, whether we're sick or not. We can use it in a beneficial way. We can make it meaningful, and by way of dedicating towards the benefit of others or using it for the welfare of others.
세상 딘데 인디가라 동생니버디 진이 채워이나 진인버디 랑의 디제 용의 투스파 주야디 디 슈야디 가상 인시지네 나서 슈인바 세상 다 진인버디 데 투스 주야디 고야디 배 계신 거리시 간에서는 진이 다 진이 투스 주투야기 상루 딘데지 매워이나 다 루종기 냥네 체통부터 주제딩 안소 시에 파샤 지당기 상는 나로라 진이 체디강라 진이디 수수를 펜베 주당 수수를 지 디제 용하게 주스를 지를 파 주야기 상동단이 매버이나 빼깔래 가보다 빼깔래 가보다 진이지 체디자 참 사사샤 시신 저 참 라네 생了熊不记 양면의 가서 그래 다 롱다지 랑네 대리마도 양면의 심바熊지진다 다니 가야 연구문도 시저 참 라네 아니 다 미치 다 주존줘야지라 다 저와 라디가는 미치긴 주디 다 존줘거래 미치주 다 미치긴 님부디 라바로 저 메디 미치 님부요 말이야 아니 배치를 다 rindu suen tuya se yin rinpu chi ne suen tuya di gale kaburi sen na rewa kanyi mewa ina yin rinpu chi de tuya di yungu marwa sen na rewa tsama la tsa di gangla da nga tsama tsa tsa xa sila di gangla sen shu tsama cha tsa di gangla subu ki shu dian cha rukdo subu ki shu nyuba dian mewa cha rukdo subu tana ya langgu na langmi tungi cha rukdo ku shinang shibu chi le tsa roda subu nyuba mengi cha dine yin rinpu ki degi mi do, de tugu mi do, di tsui nima mambu de mi tungu suri. Hana nima kazanda dari baru la chiba. Dadi nga zu minkang tinte nanglo la ne tsui haku udu, dari daji chi, ani natsa ji yuwa haku, natsa di ha ma gubi kongla dari ku subu tangdang re, natsa da yor di subu yaman zhuya da nanda yor ma re. Ina natsa yor si haku ne, dari haku ne, sani ya langdi, neti gang ya lang du gang lang me tungi chai de di na za gi jin ji re mi du sen nang lo la ngang da le ne cha sha si jin de le gu do de ne pe chen mo de da mang bu tuan yu su ji re do
So this takes us to the next topic, the second topic, which is about using difficult situations, challenging situations in life, using adverse conditions in a positive way, making them meaningful or transforming them in such a way that they'll benefit us. Now, this relates to lojong or mind training. However, we're not talking about the kind of higher levels of mind training, the higher, more advanced levels of lojong. Instead, we're now analyzing how can we transform difficult situations, challenges in our life? How can we change them around? But how can we make them meaningful? Because if we're not able to do that, then whenever problems arise, or as soon as problems arise, we will experience great problems. We won't be able to bear these problems. We may lose hope. We may become depressed, even get angry with our situation, get angry with our problem, uh, be desperate, and lose all hope. So without hope, without any hope in our life, then there's no real essence left, no life essence really left. So nothing really that keeps us going. And it will be very difficult to continue on. It will be very difficult to have, for instance, a long life. We'll feel weak, for instance, even physically feel very weak. We have no physical strength left, no physical kind of power left to continue. So we fall into this kind of mental depression, which then in turn depletes our physical ability, our physical strength, and so forth, which eventually um, leads to a premature death. So it can cause a premature death because it's difficult to live long if we really lack that drive due to our desperation, due to our depression. Sometimes people, when they, for instance, get sick, um, there can be a difference from one day to the next in the sense that one day they're kind of okay, and then the next day they can no longer move. So the example of, for instance, people who were sick. Because they were sick, they went to a hospital, or because they're sick, they go to a hospital, and then they receive the diagnosis. They have a checkup, and they receive the diagnosis that they have a particular disease, and that scares them so badly. I mean, hearing what kind of illness they have, it scares them so that. Sorry, I'll continue the next segment.
뭐 당부딜 디상 당고 그랬어. 시단 진이 뭐 세다 차고 세다 동에 세 디주제디 나서 가서 타지디 딜 메가오시네. 다 진이 종샤스 진이 뭐스라디 시쿠랑라이 가서 마가오 제지네 수수라 진이 종나야 진이 종스 지看你 러미 투바 미신다게 수수의 진이 종버디 시 문의 종유여 인의 양 종유여버디 미신다게 시두강라 디 니니마도 소리죠. 디 니마도 있어 메가오차야. 근데 진인발라베 타치도 메가오체 줘라도 넘버 탄제도 메가오체 디 제고 말해스. 가르스는 타치도 메가오체 무고에 가르스라디 진인버디 주진기 왕기 연구월에 계시 조다유나 메가오체 고에 개요마 그 조다유레스. 계시 조다에 매버 진인버이나 메가오체네 쿨은 좋게 티고 말에 네 당은 주도 견두고 말에 미가워진이 가르 핑기레스 단동 강에 강라 강에 수를 차로 그래서 저 맞아 강에 질레 잡으러 진이 좀 디가라 단동 디라 미가워지에나 르 르마디오 강에 세야 마지버 수르지 디용디 그래서 제가 디괴요 말이스 미가워지에 게요 말이스 디상 당유 디가라 죄유나 미가오고에 게임도 죄면은 미가오치 핀도 게임도 근데 상당히 타지드베 다디 존의 짠은 디민도 세데 타지드 미가오치 루디 때즈마 쇼총을 당도 그래 쇼총도 그래
So Rinpoche said previously, so some people, they receive this diagnosis in hospital, and as soon as they hear this, they feel even sicker than before. So previously the symptoms weren't as bad, but then the next day after they've got the diagnosis, then they're unable to get up and they feel really sick. So there are many stories like that. This has happened a lot in the past, or happens a lot. And then in this segment, Rinpoche said, when we talk about overcoming or utilizing adverse conditions and transforming them into something beneficial, well, when we talk about problems, when we talk about suffering, usually of course, we don't like problems, etc. I mean, just using this word like adverse circumstances, a lot of the time people don't like to think about there being a problem, there being a negative or challenging situation. Others don't like to hear about it either. Then if they hear we have a problem, for instance, others don't like to hear about it. But that's not the right kind of attitude. We shouldn't have aversion. We shouldn't feel aversion towards facing a difficult situation, facing problems, and so forth. Um, we should instead um, kind of face the problem, face it, because it's important to understand that whatever problems arise, whatever difficulties we experience, they're the result of causes and conditions. They were caused by these causes. These causes and conditions gave rise to them, which means the situation can also be changed. If it's the result of causes and conditions, we can do something about it. Therefore, it doesn't make sense to experience aversion towards a problem. For instance, if we are ill, if on top of that we also generate fear and aversion towards this disease, then we create a problem on top of a problem. In other words, on top of the illness, we already experience the symptoms of the illness that we have to deal with, then we'll experience also mental problems. If, on the other hand, we reflect on the fact, well, if there is a solution, if there's a remedy to a particular problem, why should we worry? Why should we get upset? And if there is no remedy to that problem, it doesn't help to get upset. Now, this attitude is really beneficial. This is really helpful when we face a problem.
가르치 준 거 이날에 징이디라 넘버 탄지에도 랑라 가수 그래 피미토바당 뇌베랑 신진비 니버요 말이스 시당 코란 징인바 당 나사다 틴데지 임바 이나야 랑로 용해디 디 용어 딜러 때네 랑라 넘버 탄지에도 피미토바당 근데 니버기요 말이스 가레스는 시당 나자 순르지 징인바 순르지 레버 이나야 딜러 때네 랑니 할렐 하베 루자 팀부 루팀부당 다나신 상루 동당 디좀 할렐 하베 상루 동당 아니 야돈 조야당 냥뇽 세버지 레야당 국가 세버지 용야기 디데기 내당양 용구요레스 세상 징이당 강연 용바디 넘버 탄지의 핀투 메데비 디 니버요 말이죠 미카시 나사지 레차베 지了요치지지니 나사디 용베 지了미 야부 쇼차시로 베 레가 야부 징이 파마라 샤슈 야부 슝이 근데 야부 쇼지 찬르에 디 용고요 그래서 디그 나사디 마요는 그냐만 나시 빨라 천디로 디 용네 그 핀토 그러다 미지 된다 된 버차버 그래서 나사기 진진이 미지 된다 된 버차야 돼 요레스
Now, whatever problems, whatever adverse circumstances may arise, well, it's impossible to say that it's always harmful, that it cannot benefit us in any way. It's impossible to say, there's no certainty that it will only completely, I mean, just harm us, that there's nothing, there's no positive aspect or no advantage of that particular problem. Because, well, we can tell from our own experience or from the experience of others, that's not always the case. I mean, there's no certainty as to that. It can be beneficial sometimes. It's not always absolutely devastating. So, for instance, when there's a problem and when we get sick, for example, well, sometimes that kind of sickness may help us to get stronger. We find more inner strength. We find more, or we develop more resilience when certain problems arise. We also gain new experiences. We understand, we face a new situation that helps us to grow. We learn how to deal with such a new situation. So that may have a lot of benefits, making us stronger, making us more resilient. The example of people, for instance, after they get ill, after they suffer from a disease, their life changes in a positive way. They work much better. They help their parents. So previously, before they became sick, they may have just wasted their life, wasted their time. But then they turn things around and make their life more meaningful.
진임바 간데 진이나리 년승임바 간데 진이나리 딜라 쇼니 메바 요 말이스 리비 차지당 쿠랑쿠랑라양 가서 그래 핀도 예비 쇼스라 그래다 핀도 예비 차 야면은 지 핀토베 쇼지당 핀미토베 지 녀베 쇼니 메바 하나 시 말이스 내가 간데 진이야 디 용거 요레스 때 배차 전부이나 다 갈스라고 그래 산이나니 소리지 가서 지딩기 칸기 동도에 임바이나 잠블리디 참아 동에 임바인 쓰거다 잠블리디 그 톤도에 되는 임바이나 단 잠블리 톤도에서 디가 미상마 자외 딘데기 진이 버치무지로 와다 미수이나 딘데고 말어 다 디쿠 가서 문제를 쇼디 임바리 이내 콜레다 리베 쇼지에 요 말이었으나 리베 쇼 가리요스나 다 단대긴 잠블리디 같이 나와 토로 있네요. 아니 잠블리 세버지 차에 여버 있는 딘 주부 차야기 그거디 나를 땅 바로다. 디 쇼지에다 용시로스.
Furthermore, whatever problems arise, whatever situation, whatever negative situation arises, well, it's impossible to say that it doesn't have an advantage as well. So this is true for most situations, for most problems, that there's a positive side and a negative side, that there's always two sides to that situation, something positive, something like an advantage and a disadvantage. In most situations, we can find an advantage and a disadvantage. We can see something positive and something negative. Now, Rinpoche gave an example. For instance, let's say tomorrow is the end of the world. Tomorrow, this world will be destroyed. Now, the disadvantage, of course, is that everyone will be terrified. Everyone will be scared if they know tomorrow is the end of the world. That is the disadvantage, the fear, the terror, the panic. But the advantage is that the destruction of this world may give rise to a new world. So something new to come into existence. It gives way to something new. That is also the advantage.
가르쳐 그러다 생진 균두기 지웠다고지 랑유웨이나 균두디 신의 딜레 야베 류딘 세버지 랑야기 콜로 그거 딘데지 할레 야베 지워 세버지 랑야기 그거 딘데지 게시 유웨이나 그 균두지는 못티네 대야기 칠무지 대야디 야오요르베 공유의 신의 미니 지워 딜레 하베 지워 세버지 랑야디 nga zu yongba ina, rwa, kaan junju ji nga li yongba ina, di yao yo re, rwa. Shidang ku shiya di ni ji ya, rwa, tundu di su shiwa ina, shiwa se di su ji la gagma, rwa. Shidang ku di da ji si tenpa su ri chi, sang tong dangi che wa chi. Yang sang lu shio shinda jin dama ina, ji tengi kaan toro si la wa ina re, yang mi na su su geba ji la cha chunba ina re, cha gu shiwa ji, dari cha gu shiwa ji yongba ina, 차고 용야디 두자 레 멘데바레 레디 딜 쇼신다지네 리베 차 용야디 가르스는 가서 때는 참을로 뒤서 뛴주로 두자의 야부세 참 뒤서 뛴주기 내당 두자세 뒤서 뛴주기 시에에 마도 강나에 마두고 지시네 내주 두자세지 요 말에现在 딘디 다른 가서라 강연 친구지 퇴지지네 베심바마지고 쉬우지 세대에 카토딜라 상 드레스 담인 오 당한 내단 드레지 요라 아나 가서 그래 에 누구냐야디 종송 띠 딜레 두베 강야지 종지지네 가서 그래 다 딜레 두베 강야 몽부티에요로 딜레 자 두베 강야 친구들인데 마체바 디에 야부시우지 종송스 그러 계신 딜레 두베 내단지 종네 강야 연구 종바이나 베 단대기 강야 딜레장 하장긴 자다버지 상상 딘데지 생로 코도나 체버진 누구도 상동난 돈이
It's basically a matter of attitude here. Let's take the example of an animal. If an animal dies prematurely and they are reborn in a higher state, well, that is actually an advantage if we think about it. So instead of living a long life as an animal and then being born in a higher state, they're able to experience that higher state, that higher rebirth earlier. Of course, on the other hand, that means they die prematurely, and no one likes to die. But here, the point is that it can also have a beneficial result. It can lead to something better, although it is preceded by death. And then when it comes to this life, so we may have a great problem, we may experience a great problem, but whether it's bad or not, well, it doesn't in and of itself exist as something good or bad. It's all relative. It's all in relation to something else that we would say something is good or bad. Therefore, even if something horrible happens, well, in that situation, if first we get really unhappy, but then we think, for instance, well, yeah, I'm experiencing a problem, but it could be so much worse. So I'm experiencing this problem, but luckily I'm not experiencing an even worse problem, a problem that would be even more terrible. So how good it is. So we can develop the thought, oh, that's positive that not something worse happened. So in that sense, that nothing happened that would have been even worse than the situation I'm experiencing right now. So if we can think along these lines, then we can also see something positive in the problem that we face right now. I mean, just the fact that it's not worse, that it's only that kind of problem, but not something that would be even harder to bear. So this attitude really makes a difference. This attitude of thinking it could be so much worse, it really makes a difference in terms of how we can deal with the situation.
다 산제 지 누지기 낭로는 니송요래 당연 누지 따다 단다 센티 슈토마스 칸들 누지기 낭로라 상제 지 소망아자치 두장아자 탐바치 엔 딜라 상제기 코르 뉴티 다좀바 샤리 부이나 몽게 부이나 상제기 코 다좀바 지기 취된 지진에 취디 냥스랑바이나 티딜라 다좀베 공통도 거다 뉴티 다좀베 공통도 거 제디 지진 잠베 양기 내당디 친기 요르디 지진 잠베 양기 코르 나자버티라 티바침비 취송샤다 티바침비 취송디가나 군수기 루라 티바침비 취송고마 루라 수수료 당고래 생제 탄제기 된다 조레세디 구조 레번단 흉고마 다디다 민국고 당야랑 레스지네 구조 티바침비 취라 로다 지버 티바침비 취로 꼬다버 꼬다베 진제네 구조 상만 예송의 지버다 티바침비 취로 꼬다네 예송이 네스 지버 다 예송이 네스 지에디 땡케디강라 아니 쿼다 좀 버티 수제디기 상제 종된 데라 쉬버다 다 녜취 만추기 취되네 쿠란수 배 타버 토야기 겨워상부 딘데지 유디 아니 지진 잠배양기 티버지미 취소네 쿠주 삼은 니손나라마 동송 슬라버다 니손나마 사야지 수송 시지니 상제들의 간주 잡았다 저거 디제버 아니 디제도
Mhm.
상제 정진되기 렌디를 가르송 버스나 아니 지진 잠배양 털을 캐버 인장 털을 캐버 인디간라 군수의 티버지미 취소네 로다지베이네 생기 나로라 티버지미 취기 나던 자친부디 안주로 군에 바자지 샤바 인디간라 니손도 송네 군수 림부미토바야 미기 지워 랑네 아니 티버지미 취기 바자디야 세지지네 티버지미 취로 쇼네 상제 고방 뇨니도 토야디 용규요레스 디 인상 지진 잠배양기 터시디 베지 담바레스 게시 니투 다준비 코랑의 니투기 취디 송네 니투 다준비 고반토이나 니투 다준비 고반토니 띵인진의 냠버샤니 개번에 개베바도 띵인진기 되월라 아니 네치시네 신진기 된 자친부 도야디 용무여 말레스 딜레 뒤에 통동지 인송의 마동 야레는 유부상제네 신진 빠드메 된다 도야디 베 가수 그래 개보 만부진의 띵인지기 되어了 네네 데 디진의 신진기 된제야 개보 만부진의 신진 가서 된제 제미토바의 제주 매비 이 국가 딜레장 딜레나와 상제진의 신진기 된다 아니 빠드메버 두에지 연구여 인디가라 다 니송송의 사바이네 디전요 말이스 다 니송송의 사야디 디리다다 냐원의 사야디 냐원 자식이 사시스기로 미다당에 민나르베宣布 미다당 거다.宣布 미다당에 이내당 디양 아니 자친부지 뒤죄무지 이내당 상동디간로 디펜도 종선. 뭐 유부상제기 진지 차버고 내가 인송의 사버리디 디사니 야레니 유부상제기 구진순의 차버리. 그래서 내다 도자 간대진이버이네 뒤서 뛴주기 그 야부차야기 진 란주야디 가수그래 가디네 유튜버지다 용스버 차디고 그랬어. 이래 상당히
There is a sutra. Rinpoche says he doesn't remember which sutra it is, but it tells a story. In one sutra, it tells the story of 500 disciples who had the potential, if they received certain teachings, to very quickly attain the liberated state of an arhat. So whether it was Shariputra or Moggallana, so one of the Buddha's Hira disciples, well, if they knew that if they were to teach these 500 disciples, if they were to give them teachings on the fundamental vehicle, before long they would attain liberation. They would attain the self-liberated state of an arhat. But at that time, when they were basically getting ready, when Shariputra or whoever was the Hira master who's the teacher of these 500 practitioners, well, when they got ready to teach them given these particular teachings, then Manjushri came along. Jitsu Manjushri, or the Reverend Manjushri, came along, and he taught these 500 practitioners. He gave them the teachings on the universal vehicle, which actually, from the point of view of their mental capacity, they weren't really ready to hear. So they developed a lot of wrong views because they just didn't have the capacity to fully grasp and to fully practice the teachings on the universal vehicle. They thought it was impossible. This was not a teaching that made any sense, and so forth. So due to their negative attitudes, they developed these negative attitudes towards towards the universal vehicle, and as a result of these wrong views, after their death, they were reborn in the hell realm, in a hellish kind of area area in hellish, they took on a hellish kind of existence. So this particular master, or even arhat, so the person being already an arhat, they went to the Buddha and complained. So they said, well, there were these 500 arhats who had the potential to become quickly liberated. However, Manjushri came along and basically taught them something that they weren't ready for yet, and therefore now they're basically doomed. I mean, they took rebirth, or they're going to be reborn in the hell realm. So in this way, this arhat complained to the Buddha. And in response to that, the Buddha said, well, this is just a sign that the Reverend Manjushri is really skillful. It shows his skillful means. Why? Because despite their negative rebirth, he implanted very powerful imprints. He planted very powerful imprints in their mind, so that before long, they will attain the state of a Buddha. Despite their negative rebirth, well, they'll spend some time in the hell realm, but before long, they then be reborn in a higher state and will relatively soon attain the state of a Buddha. That's why this was very skillful. On the other hand, if they hadn't received these teachings on the universal vehicle, instead they had received teachings on the fundamental vehicle, well, they would have relatively quickly attained the state of an arhat, but would have remained in the absorption that takes to mind their own cessation of samsara, and remain in that absorption for countless eons. I'll finish the rest later.
따투가 이나 상동당라 쉐버지 딘딘 다 강행지를 자천바 이나 쉐는 강행을 따당다 다기 공도 쉐디 패시하고 두고 상도 또 디파 상루 자치리 당바 이나 다야 아주 세나로라 강행 즈 마주 세쇼라 둥에지 용바 이나 둥에디 즈 투마토 세쇼라 둥에 즈 투마토 세 디양 디리 수수기 동해 즈베 뉴버디 슈치중 같이 유명을 얘기를 마도 동해 닌데지 미수지기 즈 두고 말했어야기 동해지 요 말해 어 매버잔데 마세베 동해 칸데지 임바 있나야 수수기 동해디 즈 투베 루기 또다 닌도기 뉴버디 체 롱버지 요바이나 동해 뇽야 코랑 동해 되나 동해 체유어디 동해 코랑랑 가소리 디워지 이야기 진라 파 줄지지네 라니기 디워 쳐야지 인주 동해 용야기 진 친부 진이 뭐지 시부지 친부贴的 요어디 랑기 딘 용용디가라 디더 체 용디가라 디워 용디야지 인데지 용야 요지 송교어리스 페르 차츠면 바이나 다 간데리 배는 아주 동해 즈메 동이지나 부진용의 판매기 배 시부지 장랑 땅지지네 근데 제외이나 부디 내가 총 계좌액이 내가 지내야 계좌액이 동해디 즈마도 버지지네 계롱바 간자도 계좌액이 뭐인데 내가 갈래 가기도 세지네 계좌액이랑 즈마도 다 판매기 당부니 장랑시라 만당 버지지 러제 야부 저지지네 장마지야 당 두루 추야 다 디주 야부지 제주 제외 있는 표현 요바 핀도 요바의 시행윤디 간라 진제 일로자 원의 창농 준비 부디 계제야의 장마 수에디 쿠랑기 가소리 진짜 답을 지네 내 계제기 장마 수는 빼지부도 계제는 빼지부도시 뒤지부이 뭐 쳐야지 연구도 디 수수라 동해 땡이지라 만통 버지지니 수수 수수기 지지를 지야당 디 수수 기본 용액이 진지를 파차로도
So previously, Rinpoche said, therefore, these arhats would remain in this deep absorption and for many eons and not be able to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. So therefore, they had some problems. They experienced the hell realm for a short time, but when we talk about the long-term benefit, that was much greater. So in terms of the long-term benefit, that came about much faster, which is Buddhahood, which means, therefore, although the experience in the hell realm was terrible, in particular, they were born into a hot hell and experienced being burned alive and so forth. However, this was more beneficial because it resulted in their fast enlightenment. It became a condition, a positive condition. So receiving these teachings on the universal vehicle, despite their wrong views, that turned into something positive, which is why problems may, in the short term, of course, harm us, but in the long term, bring great benefit. Then in the next segment, Rinpoche said, well, whatever the situation is, we need to always consider the situation from both sides. Try to see something positive in the situation and not just be focused on the negative aspect. That really makes a difference. And also, if we're in a situation where we can't bear a certain problem, well, we need to understand it's just a matter of our own mind, basically. When it feels unbearable, that it's just a matter of the degree of forbearance that we have developed. So there's always room for becoming more patient with the situation, having more forbearance for a particular in a particular situation, so that our forbearance, our ability to bear a problem, can be enhanced. We can use a problem. We can use something that for some people would be a problem. We can use it to our own advantage and actually uh, cause it to cause it for us to, or make it a cause for us to experience happiness. So that's possible. Now, Rinpoche gave a particular example. He said, look, let's take, for example, a particular child, a spoiled child, whose parents have never made the child do chores, to do anything around the house. If now they're required, if that child is required to, let's say, sweep the ground, they won't be able to bear it. They would find it unbearable to perform this particular job, this particular chore. But if, on the other hand, a child is raised in the right way, so if they're not spoiled by their parents, if they experience a kind of disciplined upbringing, so they have to do certain things around the house, help their parents in particular way, in certain ways around the house, then having
现代的都囊路了有的，张姐给送给囊路了，现代打上有的，基本迹象。日本爬行给娘呢，啥，日本爬行给娘呢送给卡多的了。啊呢，맛이 좀 집 니가 고대 주고도 있는 디르시 엄마지고 생제 숨버 집에 파신 것도 들으셔. 디송고도 배나 집에 냥네 시부지 공용디 간도 동에 집에 동에로 즈투 토야디 슈치치치 진루디 간라 디베 냥네디 세동부 시부지 레디 간라 신진기 체도 수부 진버 당한다 수부 두두 파 진버 당한다 아장장 디 마인버지 수수기 수분에 샤제니 진버 당하지 샤제니 진버 동야 디장 디양 샤두두두두 제 디양 마인버지 샤제버 강시지라 상리리니 춘중춘중니 바지시니로 춘중춘중 샤 꼬지시 다꼬또티 춘중지 또 양춘중지 또 양춘중지 또 네 상리리니 제버 주장 디스 동에 제버 제가 하버금 하버 제스 시치네 간들 딘데기 베 동해 용야기 진티베 수부기 샤 다 루바티조 상리네 춘중 제제바 제네 도구 요레디 니나야 상주 심베기 생기 나로라 하버 디워지 요레다 딘데기 베 즈베냐니 용수 조용디간라 동해지에 파샤시지네 데월 하버트 피에지 용거레시 디송구도다 디베 누이도 미션에 순리도와
so it says in the in the third chapter, in the chapter on patience in Acharya Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, there's a particular verse. It's also this verse is also mentioned in one of the sutras, but in particular here it's mentioned in Chandrakirti's entering the middle way. I think it's verse number 2 of the third chapter, which is basically saying that if someone, let's say, if someone unjustifiably gets angry with us and cuts our flesh and bone from one's body bit by bit over a long time, then the person who practices patience, well, this person will develop extreme happy or supreme patience towards the person who mutilates them. So in other words, they experience this great well-being, in fact. So despite this other person being so enraged and cutting the flesh of a bodhisattva, cutting this flesh piece by piece. So it talks about cutting piece by piece the flesh from the bone, like bit by bit over a long period of time. Even despite the flesh being cut away, still they experience this great happiness. So such is the practice of a bodhisattva.
디 이내야 나서 지속이 나로라 나서 참에 통토해지라 배나 다 제거기 체도 마쟁이 뒤주제디 마음이 나로라 제거기 체도 배 깔래 자기 상보다 제거기 체도 수수료 동기 상배 류동기 루슈친부 유대킹기 마음이 뒤주제디 마제가 치네 수수기 소동 도야 동야다 배 대야배 가서 그래 부버드 덴베 투네 소동야 아니 부버드 덴베 투네 수수기 수부동야 배는 수부 엄부지 전진인데 배는 바제 주게 주 칠은 두고 디가라 수부 전진 수로 양의 수쇼를 양의 강보 아니 토르고를 강보 단 바제 계시지니 배下的 差的 如果 참고 토르고를就是딘데기 엄부 전진 수부 전진 차야디 하나 땡케베 순데 지레디 딘데 용나야 용 제거를 펜바 있는 미리를 펜바 있는 잠불리를 펜바 있는 상상순데 딘데기 류동기 동해디 쇠야기 강해디 쇠야기 루터지외디 강라 디 제투도 디 제네 디 제투디 강라 제투송을 상배 콜라 가와 생라 가와당 아니 뽑아당 다나신 딘데기 에 수부전진 차팅기 마음이 뒤도 출로용디 강라 쿠랑기 가서 그래 미신다라 난지 되어서 그거를 근데 제비 난지라고 되면만 된디가 내 제토송 상배지 뽑아 요거마도 나 ombu전진당 수부전진 차송 시제 생숑의 대디 미창만의 연구도 하디 마음이 창만의 연구도 그래디 근데 용해도 띵아주 미 무슨 통해요 다 가서가
Now, this verse that Rinpoche just now repeated again. So basically, it's saying like if someone unjustifiably gets enraged and cuts the flesh and bones from the body of the bodhisattva bit by bit over a long time, the bodhisattva develops supreme patience towards the one who mutilates him. So this is actually quite mind-boggling, that kind of attitude, of that ability to practice in such a way. But however, just on an ordinary level, let's think, for instance, someone who goes to war out of a very patriotic kind of attitude. So they have strong they're very patriotic, like they have this strong national pride. I'm going for my country. I'm going to fight in this war for my country. So with this attitude, when they go to war, they're able to bear all the hardships, and it's with pride, and it's with this patriotism, like with this strong determination that they start fighting, and they may get injured, they may even be killed. However, they do it with a particular attitude. It's kind of like a joyful attitude in the sense of being happy to give up their life for their country. And then if during during battle they are injured, for instance, if they're injured at the time of a bomb going off near them, well, which usually means you lose your limbs, you get terribly injured. So there's split, there's bones, there's blood, there's flesh that's thrown about, and people use their limbs. They lose their limbs, for instance. So now this person, this person has gone to war out of this pride, or out of their nationalistic feelings. Now they're disabled, but even despite being disabled, so they don't feel discouraged. They don't return from battle. They don't return from war feeling terribly depressed, but instead they wear their injuries like a medal.
가나 유바이나 가뷰 안에 제기 자와딜라 디오마 강에 쳐야 돼요 말이스 강에 쳐야 돼요 말. 다 미가신의 제고야 다 미주신의 쇠미투신의 제고야 돼. 아니 배 시부지 강에로 쳐야 동에로 쳐야 돼. 용거요레스. 다 디인디강라 배 신진 탄지기 치도 야는 잠블리기 미 탄지기 치도 예 딘데 제디 하장이 러친부 하장이 지지 친구 임버 딘데기 배 상루디 문에기 세드 덴버지 여버이나 다 딘데기 러친지기 치도 가르치주 정보이나 깨워 상부인 야부시위인상 가나 여버이나 디체도 유체류 당토에 순들이 용기어레스다 심버디 가야기 쪼다 가야 신왕도 딘데기 왕도 주도이나 강연을 쳐야 요 마스다 강연세리 요 마스고 다 딘데기 강사디라 다디 가와라 간데스 초도 그러니까 쪼 간데스 레토르스 디가 빼는 알아서 미 탐해버지를 찾으면 있는 수수기 된다 두해 좀 있는 아주 가부시고 용도와 좋아 수수기 된다라 알레신다 파샤 미데지 구서 투어지를 양대와제 깨지시에 좀 있나 다른 가코를 깨지시에 좀스다 군년도 빠르게 해 좀스시 그 가고에 가르치는 수수 nye 된다 수수 된다지 두투송상 마음벌지 디네지 수수로 구해 된다지 용토에 요래 상상 장den기 루디 슈침부에서 디왕기 용거라 다 디기 상루디 파 도지지네 다디 장den디 계짐 쉬우진도 통디 요래 다디 장den디 계짐 문에 레베스라나 미지기 된다래 가리나 미지기 된다다 다디 마임버지 미탄지기 된다 잠블리기 된다스라는 문에 다 러침부리 다 디문에 러침부인 뭐 쳐야 되는 디 된다지 제토는 가와라세 세상 진짜기 루디 림베 치르담바이나 디체도 제고야 제 참을로 림베 즈토에 디 용고리스 디 용베 빼줘들 준주 지문나로라 로총 디레 가서 총련이 춘종원의 공고를 로 춘종원이 동해 총련의 공지진에 공부이나 당부 동해 또 지저버지 디네 딜레 치즈 지저버지 디네 딜레 치즈 지저버지 있나 타마 그 동해 타다 지저버지 용거레스 디송도
So, for instance, if we like to do something, if we enjoy doing something, then there's no hardship. So we don't experience any hardship because we enjoy doing it. We don't get tired doing it. If, on the other hand, we don't like to do something, then it's very difficult to bear any kind of hardship, which shows it's just a matter of attitude. So if we do something for the benefit of all sentient beings, or for the entire world, if that is our aim, to benefit all sentient beings, if we have the sincere attitude, or the sincere motivation to benefit all sentient beings, then even if that means we experience a lot of hardship for the welfare of others, we feel that we're very lucky. We can easily give up our own life because we do so for the benefit of others. And we feel joy. We experience joy and happiness to benefit others, even if it means sacrificing ourselves. Now, how is that possible? Let's just think of an ordinary person. How does it work for just an ordinary person who doesn't have that attitude? Well, if it benefits them, if they reap some personal benefit, then even undergoing hardship, they feel that's worth it. So, for instance, if they work very hard to meet a very famous person, to just get a photograph together with them, take a selfie with them, it can make them so happy, thinking, "Oh, I met this famous person. This is amazing." So they may have worked really hard. Stood in line and so forth to be able to see this person. So despite the hardship, because they um, achieved their goal to take a selfie with this famous guy or this famous woman. So in that case, therefore, because they fulfilled their own benefit, or they were able to do something that they wanted to do, and they got some benefit out of it, so they can bear this hardship with ease. If now, on the other hand, or taking the opposite attitude, that is not just concerned with one's own benefit, but is concerned with the benefit of all sentient beings, well, that attitude is very different then. You want to benefit all sentient beings, so until you accomplish that, whatever you do it with joy. Even if that means you sacrifice your own happiness, you sacrifice your body, for instance, your time, etc. Now, it's explained in the Bodhicayatara in Shantideva's text called Guide, in English called Guide to the Bodhisattva, or the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So in there, it talks about the fact that we can all familiarize with this. We can learn to do this, but we need to start with small steps. So in the very beginning, it's not that easy, but to familiarize ourselves with that attitude, to dedicate everything we do for the benefit of all sentient beings, do it for the welfare of others. Well, we start small, take little steps, and slowly we learn to bear the hardships that are involved in that process. So initially we can only bear little problems, but as we continue and we habituate more with this process, we'll be able eventually to bear all sorts of problems. So it's just a matter of familiarization, of habituation. In that way, we're able to bear more and more problems, in particular if it's for the benefit of all sentient beings.
단다 디 낭도 rinchen tingwa nangdo la dindaji sung yore karsa dungen wala tu tong yang zhe ka yinri meji guis da lega di che la kange cho de kin xin yi na ro lega di che la ka le tu ta ti cha ma sin sang sang den la dindaji yue yi na dindaji mi ti la 내가 제 뒤에 퉁동지 마시 매워이네 뒤에 인심 부지로 쳐야지 그랬다. 다디 자만신 상상시 휴제지 내가 지나가나 니마지 내가 집에 소리 된데 입에 소리네 좀 도지 그랬어. 저 동네 와라 가서 뒤통양 저거 인심이 주. 아니 동네 매지 디월라 가서 타에 뒤에 지진이스 말해. 다 동해 자원이 미쳐 내가디 제일 강에 자원이 미쳐지 내가디 제일 쪼유버지 내가디 제지 중는 상배 딘데기 주나 유인이 지인바이나 딜라 베게베 봐도 되고 중바이네 콜라 뒤쳐지 무쳐야 게요 말스 그 미치지 내가 제고네 그 간스 내가디 제일 가디는 쪼유디 강라 주나 유디 강라 가디는 지부도 상사배 니마연 주분도 루 루단 다와야 간데스 주어디 하모군 쓰지 딘데지니 개배 봐도 내가 지구 종내야 띠깡에 소야게요 말이에요. 가인스 가디는 디워샤다시 데디오로스 뉘안티소.
So in the Precious Garland, there's a verse that basically says, whenever we do something, whenever we experience problems, when we engage in any kind of activity, it seems to last a really long time. Whatever we do, it seems to take a really long time. Well, if on the other hand, we experience happiness while doing it, time just flies. So 1 hour can feel extremely long if what we're doing doesn't give us any pleasure. If on the other hand, if instead it leads us to feel tired and exhausted, and we experience hardship and suffering while doing it. But on the other hand, if whatever we do it with a happy kind of mind. It gives us pleasure to do so. It gives us joy and pleasure. Then it's so much easier, and it doesn't feel like this task takes forever.
세상 딜러 루지 등에메 이지 등에 갈라 예스지 송도 세상 디 가르 송도 같으나 딘데기 베 센디 준항기 신왕도 주지지네 탄제를 핀도 유대베 자월을 슈니 자워지 kinki 딘데기 미딜라 가인스나 그 상루디 가드이나야 상루스라고 자워지에디 가드이나야 펜베랑 신진다 다 수낭스라고 있는다 넘버 까와 자워 까부디 지고 그 자워 나부디 지고 말어 자워 까부디 지디간라 내가 까부 게 자워 디샤다 제윤디간라 내가 까부 제디양 까부 게 레스그로다 디 춘주 많이 버지 탄지기 체도 제윤디간라 디베 니버 치부시부지 그 디어 용에 주샤다 주디고 가두이나야 디 제디 르라 동에 퇴외 용액이 육사기 매윈디가라 르르 동에 야네야도 무트니 용액이 콜로 요 말이스 아니 상로니 쿠베 상로 동케부 지시니 동에 디월로 주투액이 상로 뒤에디가라 센레 딜레제 동에 요 말이스 다 루시 니가 디월로 니 지시니 코나 대구 정보 있나리 타발로 대구 정보 있나리 예송로 대구 정보 있나리 가바 대구 정나야 로 콜로 집어지잖아래 사제 집으로 고 말해 다 가서 있는 가래 공신 루시시네 수수 내가 지에서 대사딜 마지버 차시시네 사자 신다질 chen 지부인 뭐 사자 신다딜 사자 신다 유행기 미티 사자딜 지부 쳐고 뭐야 디네 주시시네 가서 요새딜 수 공시요 가서 파 공시를 지 디고 상동나레마도 사자기지 제우스고 말하시나
So basically, this line is basically expressing exactly this sentiment, in particular in the context of bodhisattva. So what this actually means, Rinpoche then recited the entire line. So it reads something like, bodhisattvas are free from physical suffering. So how could they experience mental problems? How could they experience mental suffering? So through their compassion, they feel the suffering of the world, and because of this they remain for a long time. So that's basically what this verse means. So it shows that for bodhisattvas, because they work for the benefit of other sentient beings joyfully, they do so free from physical suffering, first of all, but not just that, they also don't experience any mental problems. There's no mental suffering. So in that way, they are happy whatever they do, even if it's um, using their life, sacrificing their life for the benefit of all sentient beings. In comparison to these bodhisattvas, like someone like us, well, we constantly feel unhappy. So if you stay in a particular place, then we feel like, oh, I have to take a vacation. I have to go somewhere else. And then those people who go to those people in the place where we take a vacation, they want to come to our place. So in other words, just ordinary people, they may want to just get a break from the difficult life. They come to Dharamsala, come here to where we are, and we in turn feel like we have to go to their place to feel some more happiness. So we're basically having to move back and forth all the time, simply because we feel this. We associate this place with problems and so forth, and constantly have to change places. However, a bodhisattva, on the other hand, is someone who, no matter what they do, they feel happy. They're free from physical as well as mental suffering because they dedicate their life for the benefit of all sentient beings. Well, but because they spend their life working towards the benefit of all sentient beings.
가사 라는 친미 나올라 다 타메기 동선을 딜 송요레 상주선비 디네기 나올라 상주선비 주버 송요디가라 동제니 송요레 송서디 추기 나올 송요디 된다 무마디 가랑수기 상동단 라양 카툰 되어요 다리로 가레스로디가나 동해 쿠란다 강에 쿠란기 투네 친구들 취중스 제시 게시해요 말했어 디요 말스 디 동에 침부린 디 강에 침부레스 강에 코란 경우에 치중 개요 말에 강에 용행기 미기 상으로 뛰네 아니 강에 치중 차송을 했어 세상 미카셰라 지당기 미주기 강에 침부 시부다 동에 침부 시부 지대디 미카지를 뛰디 강에 가야 말해 그뒤 강에서는 저두고 상당두고 다 용다기 강에 가셔지 미 뭐지를 강에 기에 말했디 디야 미카셰지를 뛰디 강에 빼침부리 강에 침부시부 차르고 다디고 미수수수기 상도 동당랑기 토네 레마도 강에 코랑기 무이네 니 치슈레 니 충슈레세 시에요 말에 미수수 상당당기 토네 강에 지중디 차르고레 시지니 디 동자 용구도 그래서 디 문에기 디 수수이 디시 디로 고지니 버이나 양코 민다오지도
Also, in the Great Lamrim, it talks about this in the context of a bodhisattva, so the practices or the teachings of directed towards or teachings relating to a bodhisattva. Now, that being the case, but still we can also relate it to us in our situation right now as ordinary beings. So there's basically a kind of a summary saying that there are no great problems or little problems. It's all a matter of attitude. So from the side of the problem itself, it's neither great or not great. So it all has to do with the attitude of the person experiencing the problem. So for some, a particular problem may not be a problem at all. They may see it as something positive. They may see it as a challenge. They may see it as something that's beneficial. While for others, they consider that same situation to be a huge problem, to be unsurmountable, as like really difficult to bear, and so forth. Therefore, that shows it's just a matter of attitude. It's just a matter of attitude whenever something happens. Whether it's a huge problem or not depends on how we deal with it, what kind of attitude we develop towards the situation. So if we really understand that, if we grasp that, and adopt this understanding accordingly, it can really make a difference. It can make a huge difference in our life.
세상 드네 인디간라 수수라 지당기 지조 나로라 강에 친구를 지대기 내단 된대지 최외이나 양 수수기 상로 동당기 토네 디 강에 춘중 지당 마세비 디 수수라 야부 용역이 국어 지당 수수라 디어 용역이 진지라 바로 파 주로이나 디 주에게 랑가지 요래 상동에 지요래스 지당기 지조는 강에 친구지 수수의 체배 카토디라 다디 강에디 종벌에 디기 주진 나조 요래 주진 디수 디 용액이 주진 디수 조다니 군 조동ян도 민도 가수 동ян도 자생간 조다니나 강에디 자생간 조 내용그래 딘데기 준데기 톤에 랑신바 임바지 상다 안디 톤에 딘데기 강에디 체배 국가 디 주네 다 딘데기 강에디 체버 레디 강에디 다 수수기 양념지의 지지지네 양념 디투니 미신다를 파 러자자야다 디 니네들의 용구도다 니네들의 용구도다 디 제딘들의 제구도 시지네 양념 사야기 주전자부지를 지네 신了가수를 파 핀도 주야기 자진을 파 동야 야 단다기 러버나시 오 다디 강에 친구디 종벌에 강에 친구디 종배 카도디라 간데 중국에 참말로 야부지 바투제지 수지지네 지마 밀어봐 더시 가서 핀도 주야기 더시도만 랑가지 지수 수수기 강 수도버디 수지지네 신변 주야 아니 수수를 강에 강 종벌디 다기 러버나시 강에디 종배 카도디라 잠블리기 신진 탄제라 미 탄제라 펜버 주야기 상루지 디카토지 땅바이나 상루 자지무 차거도 강에 딜레 장 민도지에디 자지무지 차용 니가 아니 쿠파 시지니 토야 세상 딘데 지지니 상동용 니가라 강에贴버디 수수의 펜비진을 봐 줘야지 깔레카보다 용거리 랑상랑상의 용말디 림베림베디 루장바이나 아우 디지 제도 상상지 디 용야기 디 랑가디 요레스다
Therefore, in general, in society, we live in society, well, there may be great problems, but despite great problems, we may be able, if we experience such problems that in society in general, are conventionally considered to be great problems, we can transform this. We can, well, first transform a great problem into a little problem, into a small problem, or make it beneficial and even, or cause this problem to become beneficial and even cause it to become a cause of happiness. So there are ways to do that. First of all, if you experience a problem, well, think first of all, okay, this is a problem that has been created by different causes and conditions. So to investigate these causes and conditions and to analyze or examine, can these causes and conditions, can they be changed? So maybe we're able to change it 100%, maybe we can only change 10% or 5%, but we should try and make whatever changes are possible. And then as to the rest, if we're not able to totally deal with it, well, come to understand that it helps us to gain new experience, a new experience that may help us to, that may cause us to help others to deal with the same situation. So, for instance, if we encounter a particular problem and we're unable to solve it right away, well, that problem may inspire us to find a method to overcome this problem in the future, to help others in this world who experience similar difficulties to apply this method and thereby effectively eliminate the problem, overcome the problem. And even greater than that, if while we experience this problem, while we work towards ways to overcome it, we also have the attitude to benefit all sentient beings, then this problem turns into something very vast. In a positive way, it turns into something vastly beneficial. So it's really just a matter of our attitude, what we do with the problem, how we transform the problem by adopting a certain mental attitude. Of course, initially we'll have to bear some hardship. Of course, it comes along with initially um, kind of facing the problem, um, kind of facing it, bearing it for some time. But then we can come to see it's possible to find ways to change it, to change it into something positive, to change it into something beneficial that doesn't just benefit ourselves, but possibly many other sentient beings.
다 마시네 가서라 강에지贴버이나 디 기제요 말한 가서 강에디 체네 니도 친구지기 토네 강에디 바 시지네니 쇼총을 따네 가서 그래 다 주네 신진신来 评야 카외 라이 수수라양 강에贴베 원의 수수기 미치디양 된다 덴바지당지 수수기 다 디송 상상수리시다 가서 수수생기 나로라다 루치해야지 다 닌데 누구 중에야 개민도 상상수리지 배 루치버 수리지 수도에는 디 기상에 마도 아니 강에 친구지贴베 원의 다랑 구군이 되어 있나 디 디수리지 말아야 가서 그래 다 다기 나신 두종스라는 지금 간들 강에디 첸 티고 왔다 강에디 티고 강에디 첸이 강에디 월 루숑네 구구르지네 수수 미치디 동해긴 주주버제 드레베 강에디 원에 루 마숑버 제지네 강에디레 제워 제지네 또 딜레 러치 상르지 당내 아니 된다 덴베 토네 생기 나로로 뽑아 유베 토네 미친 주드에 되나 에, 디 야그래 디 당구래 왜 가르 당구다 당가 신다 개요 말이야 하면은 강에 오는 구군이 다랑 shum바지진 대래 디 대는 가르 핑계다 디 개용해 봐 아니 마용 베가나 마용 바랑하다 당가 신다 개요 말다
음.
So when we experience a problem, so let's say we find ourselves in a situation where we have to face difficulties and so forth. Well, in order to overcome this problem, we may use it to help others. We may um, kind of utilize the problem, work with the problem the way Rinpoche described earlier, use it to help others. And we may even be able to make our life meaningful, to find satisfaction in life. So to have this attitude, okay, there's a problem, there's something I have to deal with, there's something I have to live with. And despite that, my life is still meaningful and I can still find satisfaction. So instead of feeling weighed down by that problem. So this is just a matter of attitude. I can decide my life is still worth living, this is still important, and I can still find happiness and satisfaction despite my problems, or I can allow these problems or this problem, this difficulty to weigh me down without being able to bear the situation. But when I choose the latter, then that's a situation where it's dugyong. So dugyong was the word Rinpoche discussed earlier with the Chinese translator trying to find a good Chinese word. So it's a little difficult to translate. It kind of means a personal disadvantage that you basically caused yourself, that you allowed yourself, a disadvantage that you allowed yourself to happen. So that's the kind of situation. If you have a choice, what are you going to choose? You're going to choose to live with the problem, to transform the problem, to not be kind of weighed down by that problem. That would just be the wrong choice. That would be a kind of situation of dukgyong where you experience even more problems that you caused yourself. Instead, we should choose to find a solution. We should choose to choose this other way because we have a choice.
现在刚刚特别5年，让新那个了偏别，啷个今年当然有的，第当不赢呢，七上日，马赛第当土不赢呢，第节土不赢呢，哪只来第偏给的是个多，现在新手进步起来就讲了，你到进步起来就，你到进步起来就讲了，新不乱了，不要的，新不，怕偏不起年推的用过的。디투네 수부를 차야 돼. 수부기 나차디 만도 시지네 토야 돼. 그 뒤서 뛴주기 나차 베드 타토야 돼. 용시버레디 생기 도쇼그 토니 용투거디 디 마용바 이네야 생기 니도다 심벌을 차야 돼. 나차디 쇼 총으로 동야. 루 가서 그래. 다 딘데기 니도 매바 이나. 여러분 룽나 순데 질 트라인 인바이나 루쭈기 바드 파 시름부지 파 데토엘로 소바 시진도 동야 딘데기 니도도 신시원이야디 딘데기 된라 그 나자디 자야라 시부 핑기도디 핑기리스도디 민버 쪽인 디시 디자고 심벌르르니에 돈은 나자 자야라 핑기도 세디 용다래 체리베디 시고 그래서 딘데 인디 딘디 기사만 보시지도 니네 니도 제네 상버 힌터도 상버 장부지 제윤디 간라 딜라 순항기 떡스는 게기 네버지양 요래디 랑신기 요다 게와 게와 순항기 떡세지 로 게 네버지 심버 장부지 니도 진부지 신진을 펜비 상버 장부 상버 까부로 디 쿠랑쿠랑라 네버 티모 많이 보지 요래 디기야 생을 핑계를 르르 핑계를 나사를 핑계를 이디 그 자자자 땡케버 그래서 디 인디 간라 니도 로 친구 제바 있는 제디 다기 공도 쉬워 나신 다 간들 강에 디랑 심벌지 지네 니도 제지 용구도 그 주단 제비 준제기 돈이 상단에 아니 수수료 당시시니로 나네야 신진을 펜버지 용어쇼 만나네 신진을 펜버지 용어쇼 신내야 신진을 펜버지 용어쇼 虽然呢，新疆的偏北用修些些呢，米了偏北记住了偏北相当于的，俺当初记住的吃些的嘛都记住俺最吃些嘛的，俺做咱不里的吃些吃的过的，俺最的上不记得，叫我上不起为呢，第几年咱不里金融的评级的，咱不里上马路，帕子。你要土地吧，多的嘛，所以日记的嘛都，缺的俺这边短信吧，下学的农学，你要买的吧，真正买的，米几个苏布的吃穿不一呢，刚把也把给吃些去牛鸡，也不吃不一呢，苏布吃脏了平个的，刚把也把给吃些去牛鸡的卷小一呢，苏布吃脏的，了第，修建挺过的，修建的。가서 원세 되고 유명하게 돈에 가서 원수 초토 마도 원수 하고 마고 용기요를 마도 배 간바 예배기 부춘준지 꾸바 있네 되게 수부 차상의 휴진 되고 어디 되게 집어래 맞은 잠블인 디강도 예배 부춘준 소리 지르다 잠블이 미수부지를 차선 보이나 다 미수부강의 부망부도 차셰망부도 디나신 잠블이 디 수부지를 찾으면 뭐 있는 아주 되게 차세 충분지로 아니 아주 스마 상부지 자오 상부지 인디가라 주니 선진 탄제를 편버되는 거 되시
Now, so if let's say we have a huge problem, for instance, it could be a disease. We experience some serious illness, some difficult, debilitating kind of illness. So in that situation, what we can do is develop courage, develop an inner determination, which is really beneficial. So it's a matter of attitude in the sense that it will calm our mind. And if our mind is calmer, it calms the body and it may actually help us to get better. Maybe to such a degree, maybe to such a degree that our mental attitude causes our body to get better to such a degree that we'll be cured one day. But even if that doesn't happen, it may actually lessen the problem. For instance, if we experience a terminal illness, well, instead of only living for 5 years, we may add another 10 years to our life. So this is supported by modern medicine. That's supported by doctors. Supported by this is supported by what this is supported by what scientists tell us and so forth. So the point is, this is all supported by modern science, and something we can experience, through our own experience becomes clear that it's so helpful to stay calm in certain situations, to have a positive kind of attitude. And not just that, to develop the attitude to benefit other sentient beings, to do whatever we do for the benefit of all sentient beings. And with that, we will also accumulate a lot of virtue, a lot of positive potential, which will benefit our mind, it benefits our body, and it benefits the disease, in that the disease will get better. Therefore, that kind of attitude, that kind of courage is so important. So we take the sickness and we understand that, first of all, it was created by causes and conditions, but we don't give up in that situation. We use the sickness for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we generate the attitude, whether sick or not, may it benefit sentient beings. So whether I'm sick, may I benefit sentient beings, or not sick, may I benefit sentient beings. So if I die, whether I die or I stay alive, well, may it benefit all sentient beings. May it benefit society, because we're part of society. We live in the community. We're part of this world. We're part of a community. So that's why we have a responsibility to benefit others to the best of our ability. And if we help this world, if we do benefit others, it will have an effect on this world. We don't live in a bubble. We don't live isolated. We're interconnected with everyone else in this world. So this can be compared to, for instance, our body. So just as this whole world is like an organism, well, so is our body. And if we benefit a small part of our body, since our entire body is interconnected, it will also benefit the rest of our body, whether we're aware of it or not. Or if we injure a small part of our body, if we harm a small part of our body, that will also harm other parts of it. And again, we may not be aware of it, but that's just because the whole body is interconnected, just as the entire world is interconnected. So it does make a difference. If we act in a positive way, if we benefit others, it definitely has an impact on the rest of the world. We are part of this world and we do matter, and what we do matters, and it benefits others.
但进一步参么叔叔的偏别进一步怕主要的送个多这些图面上边我让出去苏不的那样也不认识开始了呢那我的进去呢听俺们说告诉啥呗两年三周认识马上那我的告诉夏冬节啊当初三这种节为呢아니 하장기다 초사 대중 러브치용 그랬어 근데 제도에 그랬어 나자 매네 야부리 루디오 요이나 센지의 요나 기회자와 야부 제도 그랬어 나랑 좀 미시 된데 dem버 제스에 대하고 다 구송 로 기와를 조로스라고 있는 칸들 지 기줄 생진의 펜바랑의 펜비 기준 넘버 다 같이 제디로스 디송도
So therefore, for instance, the Bodhisattva Gyaltse Tome, he said, for instance, that all problems can be transformed. All problems, we can transform any kind of problem. So for instance, if we have a disease, well, he explains that this disease is the result of different causes and conditions. So first of all, there may be something we can do about it, seek treatment and so forth, but also understand that having a disease, having an illness is a very powerful way to purify non-virtue. So it actually helps us to purify, to overcome non-virtue. And if there's no illness, well, that's also good, of course, if we don't experience any illness, because then we can use this body, this healthy body, to accumulate a lot of virtue, to accumulate a lot of positive potential. So therefore, yeah, there's always a way around it. There's always something we can do when there's a problem.
벤줄디 송저제야당 벤줄디 밀어셔야당 아니 초라셔야다 딘데기베 레가 딜라 추수 딘데 지케제요 말이스 마세베 벤줄을 띠네 지 투버자야당 뉴저요 망부치오레 디주 상원 요약해요 말이스 아니 벤주 예네 야부리 딜라 띠네 선나사요레스 진버동요레스 마세베 지 신진기 나로 가서 지속이 나로라 핀디도야 제보니가 라 펜베 자오망부치예요 그래서
Then when we consider, for instance, having wealth or having no wealth, but both is good. Having wealth or not having wealth. If we don't have wealth, that's good, because then there's no need to protect this wealth. There's no need to worry about it being taken away. There's no worry about being stolen. We don't need to worry about our wealth being stolen, or we don't need to worry about it getting lost. So we may avoid a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties, because we don't have a particular type of wealth. On the other hand, having wealth is also something positive. Again, we can use that in a positive way. We can make it meaningful by using our wealth to accumulate virtue, to give it to others, to benefit others in the long or short or long term.
뉴드 신의 시에가 가레스러디 주부 시와이나야 지 시가 라마딜라 가수 그래 바차 상부지 샤지시니 상루 상부지 땅지시니 딘데기 지 밀랑 상부지 밀랑다 템버 상부지 치니 디우라 시야기 더시디 체주그래 디 제버이나 마음발라 양다베 랑 라쇼트에지 용그레스 로 시오디 국거디 주시시네 지오 세버지 랑야디 다 시오스 베 두제르디 지 지마 지오 세버지 지오 남부 다버지 랭기 국거디 쿠 쿨르디니 와요 베아브로스 다 마시네 야브레스타로 마시버지니 쇤부지 데토나 야브레 가레슬라나 나 쇤부지 데지시네 다 냥뇽기 또바 취냥네지니 또바 망부 가서 또바 장부당 또바 배 권년 공도 피지지 딘데기 국어디야 용구리 슬라미기 신러 당아 기 신러기 최마예버디 수수기 부여베인디가나 디 인심부지지 냥nin지지네 줄지에디 용해요레 마시네 야버리스 송도
음.
So it says in Gesetomis text, it goes on to say, well, if we die, well, we should think that's also okay. If we know we're going to die soon, to have the attitude that's okay, because, well, no, we're going to die soon. It gives us the opportunity to plant some, to accumulate some positive imprints, which help us to then take a positive rebirth, a good rebirth, a fortunate rebirth. So in that way, it gives us the opportunity to prepare ourselves in a meaningful way, to find the right kind of way, or to prepare in the right kind of way for our own future, for our future rebirth. Then on the other hand, if we don't die, that's also okay. That's also all right. So if we know we're going to die, well, we may be reborn in a higher place. So that's positive. If we, because knowing we die soon, we can prepare accordingly. But even if we don't die, if we don't die anytime soon, well, that's also good in the sense that it gives us the opportunity, remaining alive for some time, to practice the Dharma, to practice effectively, and then through the inspiration of our Lama, of the great beings like the Buddha and so forth, we may be able to progress with regard to our practice, or if we progress in our practice. So that's also good. Therefore, that's what it says in the text, to take the situation as it arises and consider it in a positive way.
지딩기 자와도 자년 디수제디 당루 파 카파 부지신 상동에도 说 누구 시에 좀 보이네 시에 딜러 바비 상동에 신도 다기 공도 쉬고 나시리 다 인심 부대네 딜레 강에 단달에 두지 용도 연도치 개꾸지 하고 말에 딜레 단다 뒤서 딘주기 루부여바 아니 사야양 여바 통야 여바 내지기 원래 신나 사지통주 매번 매년 10월에 사지통주 연에 10월이 약으로 하셔서 뒤상로 칸데 땅도 망부배 땅도 들어.
So this is, of course, the attitude of a practitioner, of an advanced practitioner, but we can even bring this to our own level, to like the level of an ordinary person. So for instance, with regard to living a long life, well, that's not always something positive. If we know we're not going to have a long life, we could consider the fact that, well, maybe if we do live a long life, if we were to have a long life, we may experience a lot of problems in the future. And then when we die experiencing a lot of hardship, having not enough to eat or drink. Wouldn't it be better then to die earlier, but to die without this hardship, having enough to eat and drink? So it's just a matter of attitude. If we do happen to have a shorter kind of life, we could also see it in a positive light, in the sense that it could be so much harder to die in the future under these difficult circumstances. So then it's better to go now. It's better to die now.
다 다른 가서 된생이 마도 차마서 가진 쉬에 전세 당보디 류동배 수이듯이 니버디 징임바 대화집이 두수 봐 주야 고디 다 오지 다리 차비 쿠이레다 자산다 중마서 아니 전세 송바디 되샤 지들 집이 수이디 디슈에 중마서 아니 시바디 주단 제비기 낭샤디 중마서 다디 지마 시고 인사리 디샤 안다기기 태워디 디리샤 갈사 음 디도 지슈나 된송 控制欲是汤还是秤？控制欲，控制欲望。这第五，这的，喜欢控制别人是贪爱对方吗？还是嗔恨对方？想要控制对方，顺从自己的想法，如果不听的话，甚至会暴力相向。那这样的话，是否应该算是嗔恨？那的繁体字呢，挺多的，我就录西嘛，顶着找寻思的。那讲的，迷信大的，卡的迷信大，村镇节啊，结果上不当，村镇马街呢，垄断啊，说，他那边你懂当然了，说吧，顶着节的，对，卡的也是对家这边公主这边是说，他迷信到了村镇结果上不定对家这边卡的事情。但的适当迷信到了看着结果上不的迷信到的，人对下有忘记看着结果上不的用过了，村镇结果上不的，刚意思呢，敌人对下有呢的大不结果上不去，大不结果上这个叔叔给记得对吧？那星期古别节当过上不的去，对吧？那星期别节当然嘛，就这个龙海的用过了，现在的对下给忘记啊用死个的，空中忘记啊用死个的，但是各个给年当了大就了。
So Rinpoche said, well, today Rinpoche was able to talk about two topics. One was the topic, one was about letting go. So Rinpoche talked extensively about that particular topic. And the second was how to transform problems in the sense of, transforming a problem into something beneficial. So there's maybe a little left to say, but anyway, she wasn't able to totally complete it. And then as to the third and the fourth topic, she wasn't able to speak about them. So how to overcome attachment, as well as how to understand or to explain like causes and conditions, to give a presentation on that. She was unable to finish that, but anyway, he was able to basically cover the first two topics, but he also wanted to answer a particular question someone asked. So the question is, in terms of a person oppressing someone else, or torturing someone else, beating them up and so forth, what is the main driving force of oppressing and torturing someone? Is it a desire? Is it attachment? Or is it anger? And in response to that, she said, well, it just depends. It depends on the situation. Like if you want to control someone, you want to own someone, you want them to do whatever you want the other person to do whatever you like because you want to own them, well, that's out of desire, that's out of attachment. But if then on the other hand, they don't do what you want, so there's something you want them to do, but they don't do it. So out of anger, you try to oppress them, you try to control them. So in the first case, it's attachment or desire. In the second case, it's anger that's the driving force. It always depends. It depends on the situation. I'd like to add something. So previously, Rinpoche used the word dukyong. Actually, what it meant and the way Rinpoche used it was like, well, if you don't do this, you can do it. You have the choice, but you don't do it, that's your loss. That's probably a better way to translate it. So the way he used the word dukyong means like it's your personal loss, your own fault, basically.
춘생제디 제국으로 구구 말했으려나 디 춘생제네 핀도 가른도면도 따주리 춘생제네 村镇建设与的偏多卡的用途的，地做了，带年村镇起码界的他结果来什么的，但要叔叔让你明显的这个村镇结原因呢，你可以村镇结第一我了，如呢，古巴气温度、卷气温度，明显的个叔叔的出村镇结的抗潮结的咯，的，年关节人对年木关节人度。可以看出结文当心，第五人主关系人对主木关系人多，样呢，主呢满主基本因不因呢，但常常主呢这个常常满主这个大概接着，现在做的古巴卡的原面了，但他接第二上个图，但地方都第二线还是当个 scale 嘛的，但变得怕嘛一步来看村镇接的因不因呢？补了偏南上边村镇几个人，对下当就越是个的，这个的，这的做的，他妈给补了村镇节的，可松节节的，偏度中南上公路的地下的个的，公路，告诉我的，杨大不记，公路偏北公路就有的，这的公路第五年村镇节当的解决的，大。창버지 용거래 용거래 용거 말했으려나 뒤땡땡 요 말에常常 태잡아 용거래常常 쇼총 잡아 용거래常常 그 따다 렘버지에 용거래 세상 수수기 딜러 빠베 더 캐비톤에联络에 되나 联络不是了 그래 더 캐비톤에 동행제당의 종나 군대가 오래 동행제당의 더 캐비톤에 전세 하장기 태잡아 제베이나 딜러 빠베 수수기 동행 캐비제네 봐多子他们给马东死了，怕但旁边的村镇节，感觉东着节为呢，当不你感觉马当呗，马当时马拉不去怕雨呢，可你起不赢的嘞，讲的气冷主要的吧，气冷主木个月土呢，怕都是他人生的是过了节呢，主要呢，地大不能说钱给他特些出去过了的。
Now, with regard to, well, Rinpoche spoke previously about oppressing someone. Now Rinpoche uses the word in a slightly in a slightly different way. So instead of saying oppressing, but like controlling someone, controlling another person. So if, for instance, we control others, we are in a situation, we find ourselves where we have to control others, it's important to analyze, is the situation beneficial or not? Does it benefit the other person or not? Or if we are the one being controlled by someone else. So again, is it something that benefits us if someone controls us? We need to check. Maybe there is a necessity of doing so. So, for instance, let's take the example of like parents controlling their children. That can be done out of a concern for their well-being, that we need to the parents need to protect their child, because if they don't control the child, the child may harm themselves. Or is it out of desire? Is it out of attachment that I try to control the child? And in that situation, therefore, it's important to be also to deal with it in an effective way, to not allow ourselves, if it's out of the wrong motivation, if it's done with the wrong kind of motivation, we need to deal with it effectively, maybe try to get away to avoid that kind of control, or if it's for our own benefit, to bear it, to be able to live with that, if we find ourselves in such a situation. And also when we control others, it's important that we do it in a balanced fashion. If we find ourselves in a situation where we have to take control of someone, well, then to do it in a balanced way, to not be too strong in our approach on one hand, but also not to be too weak, so to be effective. Therefore, yeah, so it's very important sometimes to be more neutral, or yeah, more neutral rather than taking control or controlling someone in a very strong way. So the point is basically we need to check the situation and adjust it accordingly to be sure that it's beneficial and not harmful.
근데 파마 지단 샤자 요르디 창창 파마 인내레 게라 인내레 수 인내레 창창 가서 샤자 요르디 샤자 유에 자네 가전 당야 망자버디네 요구로 가전 동야 초단 당야 망자디간라 나조 안주 차부차 그러다 디데 다 망자기도 상상스러시 디디 가전 동 당분이 가전 동서기 치라 루무고나 만두베지 칸바 신다실 데데베 인내레 로용시네 도지 가서 그래 那个几都是把他人些些呢，还是怕淤呢口呢，多弟弟看，旁边有时打上，见了有时打上，起码那感觉啥个咯？所以第七轮中国去，叔叔康明了爹呢，比较深点位，那老兄切点位，那估计怕叫呢，那那个有些些呢，第那个股淤土了的了，那个地里怕淤土了。
You say. Okay.
So it may also, for us, the way we should react in a situation like that. Maybe sometimes we need to seek a distance. For instance, of course, our parents, what they do is usually done out of love. Or in the case of like a teacher, like for instance, in the monastery, like when you have like a room, as they call, like a room teacher, like someone who takes care of you, who deeply, like, who loves you, who does everything out of love for you. But sometimes that love may be too much. It may lead our parents or this particular teacher to try to discipline us too much, or when something happens, they scold us too much. And the point is that in such a situation, when we feel like it's gone beyond a certain measure, it's important to find some distance, maybe just to take off for some time and I don't know, go somewhere where we're not near this person. So maybe read the scriptures on our own. So that helps um to kind of lessen the problem. It just creates this distance. And in that situation, that may be effective. So you may say to the teacher, "Oh, I've got some work, I've got to go somewhere." And instead of just bearing all this scolding, which can be difficult to do, you just, yeah, take off for some time. So create a distance, and that helps to calm the situation.
拉当帕马当叔叔的教育经济，他感觉多样因那的控制是能的，存在些的上路现代进当被那的被教上不的是，的被教上不的是吧？的那前天原本的教上不的是，叔叔的初当当天，帕马的初当当天，原本的被教上不，我那是那搞过去的，的搞过去，但你们去初当当天没有钱呢？ 아니 파마 매버 차나 다 디디 강는 거네 초단 단계지 여러 지나 상바 세낭로 딘데 그 레고르다 세상 디디 강라 나서 비제 낭로의 디송도 갈사 가전 잡부 장아 있어 바체스는 디시스 다 라마기 긴라기 가전 동에 줘로 가전 동에 딩원에 지는 하 동에 딩 아주 바체 두비체도 아주 나 상하기 하 당그로 배는 아주 오만이 배미 홍세다야 단지기 하인의 신변적 구다 하얀게 훌루훌루 홍페시 다디 장에 가서 바체 두에 체도 당고로 라마기 가전 땅에 수수 야부 님베인 다 바체 세기 한 무마디 어디레스도 세상 디 가전 동기 유베디 자신버린도 가전 잡부 장아이 바체 신의 디시스 아니 라마기 니돈 담바이나 파마기 니돈 담바이나 디베 가사 다디 치딩고마 신런주는 디인주세 간다 수수의 신런진주에 여베이나 파마기 니돈 담야다 긴라기 니돈 담바이나 디이토니 신런주레스다 그래서 딘데 상다나 수수 동경기 파마 여바다 긴라 여바디 베 자친부레 베 자친부레로 그래서 디 야부시라인 상바치 다이네야 창창 가전디 미구버지다 오늘 이지 가서 그래 마 잡아지 되네이나 다기 터시디 땅에 수수문이 디난신기 터시신다 터케부인데 딱 비지 터시 비지 지진에 봐 내거지 파딜 유에기 터시 지는 뒤로다
음.
Now, actually, when we think about it, it's actually a good thing. I mean, having a teacher who cares, having parents who care, who do whatever they do out of their love for us. So that may mean in certain situations that they discipline us, that they're hard on us. That's possible. But in the end, we're so fortunate that there is someone who cares. So then if we think about it, it makes it easier to bear being scolded or bear being disciplined because maybe one day they're no longer there. No, maybe one day our parents are gone and then we may miss them scolding us. We may miss that kind of situation. I mean, being disciplined and so forth. Therefore, it's important to remember their kindness and remember how precious it actually is that they care for us and do what they do out of their care and concern for us. So there's actually a saying that basically says that the scolding of our teacher is like a mantra, like a mantra that removes obstacles for it, helps us to overcome, or it eliminates imprints, the certain negative imprints. And if they beat us, it's like a blessing. So, in other words, there's certain mantras. There's certain mantras, for instance, the Hagrid mantra and so forth, that are used to dispel obstacles. So, in this sense, we could consider for instance, if our teacher scolds us, criticizes us, to see that as a powerful mantra that helps us to overcome obstacles, that helps us to purify our hindrances. While if we get physically beaten up, so it's kind of like seeing that as a blessing. So the point is, therefore, we should see the positive aspect of that it can be beneficial. On the other hand, if it goes over the top, if it's too extreme, then it may also be skillful to seek some distance in a sense that, take off for some time so that the situation can calm down and it's no longer as extreme as it was before. That is also okay to, uh, yeah, to examine the situation. Is it measured or is it too extreme?
王国的基本的是新人军的第一就是些呢，我就送到
嗯
他旁边的基本人物。
So actually, it basically says when the teacher beats you, it's like an empowerment. So this is actually the actual word. So it's like the blessing of an empowerment. You receive a blessing. It's like an empowerment. It's just, and this also applies to the parents. And thank you, Rinpoche says. That completes the teachings today. Let's leave it here. Let's finish here.
就是大大的路尼的功了，但路送嘛的，你都你去咱那个新的那边个其实你去仔细中国人不行，你当然是了，我得是个吃的了，他公布做吧的，的确的可以多，但你都你去咱你再送仔细咱啊，他路送大大的，也的确的大大开下，你的确的卡上开的些，的卡上去你哈古送，给些穷送。 세상 뒤뒤뒤의 뒤에 단다 모면한 된디 간라 상매 아니 투미 나로나 종래는 뭐지 더 군뒤네 나라 못에 남버에 나라 춘지 투석이 자유라면 차대거든 뒤지의 취만不쉬어 농만不쉬어 세상 투지 가서 그래 세된 다단 줘야다 아니 구이 양식牛都 폐야다 아 아니 단다 네그 카톤데와 가서 차디서 중국人不下算不赢了，那送去呗，忙不空呗，新家亲不休息人多，空着了，他民啊当的那忙不起，穷不了，现在的家庭作用都是难多了，公路家庭不修不了，三年工不做呀，因为那大的工单木木缺要的，牛西要么嘞，三年工不做呀，这修修不去的俺不是皮起嘞。 다리 공다 모모치네 다다 난준 난신의 공루 잘페네 파스페야디 다 데스데스 쪽으로 마도 페토어 저디 미세리 디라수바 디 다랑살로 슈바라고 마마주 공라 루니스 루지라스마 니스 슈바레 코비드 19 인도네시아 담바 니슈 자지 레 루지 루송레 니동 니슈제 니슈자지 디바루를 파 소쇼레 지페버레 진수 강단 니동 니슈자지 차상 슈버레 잔니기 신당하고 봐도 쇼도 제전 루니 파스 쇼이나 디레시레 뭐 마조공의 지라스 인서 뭐 디레시 디지 디바루를 춘지 망부토야기 국가 중요래 엔디 가디 산지미 저거 이마 인디가나 참에 가서 투미 메lan나로나 시리고 쉬
So, yeah, yesterday the teachings, well, yesterday and today. So actually, yesterday's we had these 2 days of teachings, and yesterday's teachings actually coincide with the death anniversary of Kyongla Ratu Rinpoche, who passed away in 2022 on May 24th. So yesterday was also May 24th. So Kyongla Ratu Rinpoche explained it was through His Holiness that he was one of the root lamas, or Rinpoches also root lamas in the sense, because he received so many teachings from Kyongla Rinpoche. And Rinpoche says, well, please pray for Rinpoche, pray that may all his wishes be.
내가 또 군두기 낭달지야지 네 가서 그래 샤로 쉬어 다 쉬고 있어
So it was through His Holiness, in the sense Rinpoche explained that His Holiness basically introduced me to Kyonlarata Rinpoche because I helped Rinpoche to compose Rinpoche's biography. So with this work, through this work, I got to know Rinpoche better, and I received a lot of teachings from him. So let's pray for that all his wishes may be fulfilled, that he may have a good reincarnation, may be reincarnated sooner, reincarnation may be found soon, and may all his great work be accomplished. So Kyongla Rinpoche, he was actually in Dharamsala. It was at COVID. He was basically stuck in MacLeod Ganj, and he was here for 2 years before he passed away. So Rinpoche at that time received so many Dharma teachings and instructions from Kyongla Rinpoche. And he also says that Rinpoche was so extremely kind. He lived up to the age of 100, and he was fine until his last day. In fact, the night before he died, or the evening before he died, he had momos. And then the next morning, Rinpoche remembers it was around 5 a.m., he passed away. And he lived such a long life and was basically in very good shape. At the end, he found it a little difficult to walk. But still, he was still relatively well, and he was such an amazing person. So Rinpoche says, please pray, all of you. Now, I request you to all of you pray for Kyongla Rato Rinpoche. So with this prayer,
다기 진이사베 기원데 된단 로 공라 강변의 치버지 젠로 산타와 템베 니버진도 세시슈 강리자요 고여신가 조변나 되어만네 신뢰성과 된지 장수의 샤베스디 바도 된주로지 지진람이 구지려 된지 난거치네 슈육제바 로산 템베 되미 사송 진조의 미시 다드네 주로지 라보송데 모멘 zembayin dibe suyi satin yunga tada shiru shayaside tudin shujur jebi tashi shu 谢谢大家
谢谢Rinpoche。
谢谢 thank you everyone everybody everyone ทุกที感恩 베디나 길 투지 칠러시 가서 상만 러시 마서 간